Yes, Baba Smalls, greetings.
Good evening. How are y'all doing, Brother Haru and Sister? Sorry I'm running kind of late, but we were working late, and there was nothing I can do
Oh
about
no,
that.
that's fine.
And I left all
That's
my notes
fine.
back at the office. So I was looking for my timeline because that would supplement what I had on the notes. You ever put stuff down? I'm so used to throwing stuff, right? But we gonna roll when y'all ready to roll.
Right.
That's
So,
Oh, whenever you're ready, we ready. I'll give thanks for being here, squeezing me your busy, delicate schedule. I truly appreciate it. I feel honored that you put me into your schedule and made time for me. I give thanks for that all the while.
oh, I appreciate that. I
You
didn't know
know?
we would have to. I'm working on that Godfather of Harlem, and today we were shooting the Malcolm phase while he's in Mecca. So I had to be there for every scene, make sure
Okay.
they got it right, you know.
Right.
And you're gonna see more of Malcolm on the screen in the Godfather of Harlem. You've already seen more of him than any movie has ever done. But this 10 episodes is gonna even be more Malcolm, you know.
wow.
After in the 10th
Oh, it's gonna
episode.
be
Looking
the
forward to
real
that.
deal. The stuff they
Yeah. Well, we're still dealing with a lot of fiction, but it's more history than you've seen in any of the others. And we cover things they don't cover. We deal with him and Betty and the children and the family, and not just him fighting the war. We deal with him with his friends and his comrades. We deal with him working with other people in the community to fight against the occupation of our community by other groups. So
Mhm.
not just him speaking the powerful words,
Oh, okay.
but look at him as a real human being. We see him in Mecca living in another brother's home who's helping him out and him making friends with that brother. And, we could have just shown him doing the speech and, that he did there. But that would again just be another Malcolm at the lectern. He says, okay, before he got up there for that hour, he had spent
Right,
23
right.
hours with somebody. What was that about? Kind of thing.
Right.
So
Oh, that's going to be interesting.
that's kind of what we were
True.
doing.
True.
And if I'm not there and it goes bad,
Hmm.
since I'm the consultant, I got y'all gonna blame me. Yeah, but Brother Small was there and he let that shit get by. uh, yeah, I'm not gonna win all of
Yes,
it.
that's the first thing they're gonna say. He knew better, and he still let it go on.
But this is their money, their movie. Me and a few other blacks are fighting to get as much of
Okay.
us in with authenticity and dignity as we
Right.
can, you know.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Yes.
but that's it. I'm still wondering where the
Okay.
heck is the timeline? But we'll work without it. And I have a bunch of timelines. So I don't see one of them, right? But,
Oh, we'll give you a few minutes. We'll give you a few minutes to look for it. I'm still waiting for maybe one or two people to come to the panel. So we'll give you a few minutes. It's no rush.
okay, let me stand
I
up.
did want to
Maybe
let
it'll come
David
into my
know.
vision. Timeline.
Okay.
Only See, you just have to stand up once, and get focused. There it is.
Right.
Right, left it. So we can make sure we get some of the dates and stuff in when we're talking about certain things around religion.
Of course. Yeah, because that's a real delicate topic.
Well, I make it
And
undelicate because a lie is a lie is a lie. And you've been losing, losing,
you
losing. And
see,
you're going to tell the same lie and continue to lose. Somebody need to pull your coat that you listen to a lie and you lose it.
Right.
Now, the lie helped us for a minute. And we need more than a lie now. We need the truth.
of course.
But we'll just have fun. We know our people need teaching. They need to be informed. We're, as much as we have all these degrees, we're still so very uninformed when it comes to ourselves, you know.
Right.
So we'll get there.
Right.
So I'm ready whenever y'all are ready.
Just want to say
Yeah, because
greetings,
we were on
greetings,
a
everyone. Greetings, Baba.
Greetings,
It's a
my brother.
pleasure.
How are you doing?
Well, I'm good. I'm greeting you all from St. Lucia.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Now, now you're gonna make me wish I could get on a plane and come to some
Well,
paradise.
yeah, he wants to go to St. Lucia and do a lecture, Baba.
I'd love to. You know, I've never been to St. Lucia. I've been all over the Caribbean, but not St. Lucia.
Well, your name among certain circles, your name is very strong on the island.
Because all I'm trying to do is fight. At 76, I'll be 77 in a few months.
Wow.
3 months.
Wow,
So
wow.
You got to figure, the older you get, the harder you got to fight, you know, to keep stuff going. It's from the cradle to the grave. You know, we're fighting for freedom. Freedom isn't the word. Dr. Asa Hilliard said, freedom is being shackled to your identity. And our biggest problem today is how could we possibly be unclear on our identity? You got folks that want to be the Moors, and then that's our identity. Then the Hebrews, and that's our identity. And the foundational, that's our identity. And the Edos, no, I'm just African. I'm black and I'm African. People say, well, your skin is brown. Well, browns ain't nothing but shades of black. Okay. Everything else is an aspect to the identity. Yes, some of us were Hebrew, but not all of us. Some of us were Christians before we came here to America in slavery, but not all of us. Some of us were Muslims. But those were things that the black man and woman was doing. That's not who the black man and woman was. That's why we can change them. Stop being a Muslim, I become a Christian. Don't like that, I become a Hebrew. So now that means none of them are you. Those are things you do if you have a good purpose.
Yes.
But those are the kinds of things we'll discuss.
You know, you have some.
We'll get into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you have some people that can't let go of the Abrahamic religion. They stuck on the Judaic.
But we understand why. What we got to do is tell them why they have to let go. That was the only boat in the sea at the time. They were able to open their eyes, so they jumped on that boat. They didn't have time to ask how many holes was in it, you know, how rotten is the wood that made it. It was the only thing. But now we're drowning all over the place. We're murdering ourselves everywhere. Our girl children are getting raped at 13, 14, 9, and 10 years old, all over the place. We don't own half the land we owned 50 years ago. We don't control the economic, even in the black countries we live in. So that tells us none of that shit's working anymore. It worked to get us a little distance.
Thank you.
But it's not working. And so, but don't laugh at them. See, they're the deaf, blind, and dumb, and you're the teacher and the healer. So you got to come to them serious so that they'll understand that you didn't come to hurt them, you come to help them. Because they're going to interpret what we do.
We was trying.
But we have to convince them that no, we love you. We love you. We've come to help you. And we know you're not going to understand it. And we know you're going to fight us, and you may even kill some of us. Because most of our leaders were killed by us, not by the white man. Other black people from Africa to the Caribbean to here. We're the ones carrying the white minds that have killed our leadership or marginalized them so they weren't effective. So we have to come with a fierce love that can also protect itself from our own viciousness that's coming after us. And it's not easy.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
That's our spiritual culture.
Yeah.
Our spiritual culture said we're God having a human experience, not them. We have to teach them how to become gods having a human experience. And that's the work. The Europeans' culture
some
is
people
based
will say,
on demons, but that's normal for them. Being a demon is normal for them. They're having fun. They're in their element. Being a demon is not normal for us. It's destructive to us.
right.
Would you say, Baba, that
Because on
religious?
Sunday, sorry, wait a second,
That's
wait,
okay.
hold on. On Sunday, we was trying to reach certain ones on the levels that you were saying, and trying to show them and teach them, and show them why these things are not working for us anymore with this religion and this Bible. And they found every excuse on the planet to say
Of
that
course they're going to.
we need
Your
to
job
use
is
it
to
because
know that they're going to find
it's
every excuse. Remember, you're the freedom fighter. They're the incarcerated mind.
But it got to the point where we can't help them. It got to the point where we can't help them. They won't listen. They're arguing. They turn the argument.
Then you need to stop what you're doing and get out of the business. The job of the freedom fighters, no matter what the cost, have to figure out a way to reach those that is in need of freedom. It ain't easy. It's the hardest job on the planet.
I know.
But we have
Trust
to do
me,
it
I know.
understanding they're not our servants. We are theirs. We are their servant. That junkie, that murderer, that thief, that betrayer, that collaborator who don't know what they're doing, we are their servants. They're not ours. And if we be clear on that, we'll save them. But they got a king and the white man that looks like the most powerful thing on earth. If you come out acting like the white man, you're a lesser king. Why would I come to you? Let me stay with the king with the power. You know what I'm saying? So that's we're gonna talk about all those things.
Yeah, I get you.
But I think, Baba, one of the issues with the Abrahamic religion is that embedded that fundamental religious intolerance.
Yes, that's part of the problem. But we end up in the Abrahamic religion. Don't get caught up talking about the Abrahamic religion like for the last 400 years we had some other religion going on, right? We've been in this Abrahamic thing trying to survive for nearly 400 years because they cut us off from our thing. And so we took whatever vehicle was available. That is the most intelligent thing a person could do. But that vehicle is not sufficient for our salvation. It has run its course. But the people don't know that. That's our job to say, hey, our fathers and mother had something better, but they cut us off from that. Let us show you how to get back to that. Then you can save yourself, save your children, save your grandchildren, save your land, get more land, get control of the politics where you live, get control of the economic where you live. If you use the system that the ancestors used before we met the enemy, that defeated us because we have to accept we got our ass whipped. All right? You got the hell beat out of us. But now we're back and we know how to fight the enemy. But we can't mistake our people for the enemy because they're not the enemy. They're the cause for our fight. And that's what we have to be clear on because we are the priests. We are the priestess. We are the warriors. We're the saviors. And that comes with a price. Nobody gonna like you. You know what I'm saying? Some gonna try to kill you. They're gonna always verbally abuse you. But we know what our job is. And we come to do a job. And we know we got the ancestors on our side. And we got God on our side. Whatever name we use, Larry or Laroon, you know, Uncle, whichever one, Amun, Fatah, it don't matter. It means the same thing. We can't get confused in language either. All of it means the totality of existence of which we are a part. We represent the balance in nature. The Eurasian represent the imbalance in nature. They're doing their job to create imbalance. We need to do ours to create balance. We're the ones that's out of sync. The white man is in sync. What he's doing is normal for him, but abnormal for us. That's why we're in trouble. But we're going to get out of trouble. Because we're God, and we got to say without being afraid, having the human experience. See, some people even say that, but they don't really believe it because they're scared. I don't want to be God. You know, well, I want to be God. Shit, teach me more, give me more. You know, and I'm having this experience. So, but let's not give up too much of our energy, because when we give it to people, we start talking, then it won't come back to mind. You know. So let's hold it in until we're on air.
Right. Okay. Yes.
But
yeah, so the origins of religion. I think we thought they. Yeah, with the origins of religion.
But wherever you want to start, because none of us know the answer to any of those questions you asked, but we're going to try to say what we know. Because imagine to have the origin of everything, mean you have to be in the beginning. And if something is supreme, there is no beginning and there is no end. Those are illusionary concepts we created for ourselves to see if we could fix things. But how could there be a beginning? If there's a beginning, then something else had to have been there to begin from. So what is this beginning? And the same thing, what is this beginning? So just looking at language and concepts, there is no beginning. Now we want to go back and say, when is the oldest time that we can recall in both oral recording and written recording? See, white folks started to trick us by saying history started when writing started, because when we gave him writing, that's when he started learning. So he said that's when history began. So during all of that period when he didn't have a writing system, he wants to call that prehistory. How could it be anything as prehistory? That is a stupid concept. Prehistory.
Yeah.
History is everything that people do. Like
There's this book, Baba, called Waknet Chimsu by Aikwe Ama.
Oh, Ama, yeah, he's a god, real god.
Yeah. Well, in that book, he speaks about the independence leaders, and he speaks about how their European education betrayed the mission from the beginning, because their knowledge base was Hegel and Karl Marx, and a lot of persons who said that Africa had no history. And he even speaks of Nkrumah trying to use European tools to fix something these tools had already destroyed.
Yeah, but not just Nkrumah, everybody did, because those were the only tools we have. You can't blame the victims. Even in an intellectual discussion, and Amma was wrong with the way he presented that. He could explain that even Garvey was using European tools to fix the situation. Book of Washington.
I was going to mention that. I was going to mention.
Yeah, because that's the tool that was available. And when you're in a crisis, you use whatever tool that's at hand. But when we learn better and we get other tools, then we try to master those tools and present it to the people that these tools are more efficient to do what you say you want to do than the tools you're using. Matter of fact, the tools that you're using may be putting you in a deeper slavery than getting you out of that slavery. But that's our job. See, we're the teachers. We're not the prosecutors. We're not the persecutors. We're not better than. We are them. And we are servants to the worst of us and the least of us. And we are servants in trying to find the way that the ancestors gave us that is most efficient. But let's not talk. Are we on air?
Yeah.
We are.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are.
So then we can talk. Because sometimes if you put all your gems out before you get on air, then your mind don't go to that cabinet when you start talking. Because it feels, I've already opened that cabinet. Let me go to another one. You understand? I know it happens.
Yeah, you done said all the good stuff. Yeah.
Right. So one of the key things, the word religion means to bind back. The fundamental question is then, what are we binding back to? And so, what is the thing that one should most want to bind back to? To the instructions and the information of our ancestors that allowed us to do the most basic thing, to provide food, clothing, shelter, and safety for ourselves and our family. See, we get so esoteric and so intellectual, we forgot what the fundamentals are all about. The fundamentals is about, can I feed myself and my family? Ideology is just a tool that's supposed to help you in the group feed yourself and your family. We get so far away from that, talking about this deity and Amun this and Ptah this and the pharaohs this, and well, all the pharaohs are dead and Africa's in the enemy's hands. Somebody made a mistake. Somebody made a mistake. In judgment, we saw this thing, and instead of killing it on the first occasion, we tried to humanize it. Well, we humanized it just enough for it to kick our behinds off of the continent of Africa, and they're still taking all of our resources for themselves so they can kick our behinds some more. So then we get to the fundamental question. How far back in history can we go as African peoples to find answers to how to solve the problems? I'm putting on all of my lackes. I got to call in all of the juju we got tonight. And so we know.
That's right. Bring on the protection. That's right.
Millions of years, right? Millions of years. But we need to get away from the white man's concept of when we were warriors. We never had a warrior society. The closest we got to having a warrior society is when we encountered them and had to transform ourselves. That's what Shaka did. Shaka never fought any white people, but he saw them coming spiritually. And he built that mighty Zulu warrior concept because he knew through the dreams and through the ancestors that something was coming to destroy us, and we were not prepared for it. And when they're going to make a movie about Shaka, another one. That first one was just white folks' fantasies, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Baba, how true do you think the original Shaka Zulu storyline in that movie was? Because
that was just white folks' fantasy.
Okay.
I mean, they had a few historically accurate, but that was written by
trying to control the narrative.
But that was the first time that I actually.
Just let me finish that. Those who wrote that book, they were the only two white men that Shaka ever met. And he met them because their boat crashed in KwaZulu land. You see? Wow. He never met any other white people, but he knew from the spirit they were coming. And he knew they had something we didn't have. And so he set out as a spiritual phenomena to build a force to counter them. And if you study the Zulu Wars, they were the last people of South Africa to be defeated. And they weren't defeated until the white man came up with the Gatling gun and the machine gun. We couldn't counter those two weapons. You know, you got to study Sechiweya and Bambata, you know, and other great Zulu warriors. But Sechiweya and Bambata, I mean, just wiped those people out with bows and arrows and spears, even though they had cannons and recoil rifles. But when they came up with the Gatling gun and the machine gun that's going to kill 1,000 people in 5 minutes, we couldn't compete against that. And so our ancestors decide you can't fight that. Give to that. To fight another day. You know.
Baba.
That the margin of white people's victory isn't them being smart or their superiority, because they're not superior to anything. Their victory was a technology called the gun, with the use of something called gunpowder, which they got from their Asian cousins, all right, the Chinese. And the first enslavement of us in large numbers was in the Persian Gulf, in the saltpeter mines in the 6th, 7th, and 8th century, right? Mining saltpeter to make gunpowder, which then was used against Africa. One of the greatest rebellions in the history of the world was not Haiti at all. That's a later great rebellion. And it's significant because it's the only nation that freed itself from slavery and abolished slavery. But you got to go through the rebellion of the Zanj in the 8th century. And that's Zanji, Lanji, the Zanj rebellion. That's where Kuwait is in Iraq, where they defeated the Arab Muslim empire, but made the same mistake we always make. Go and sit down at the table with your enemy to make peace instead of wiping them out. And on the way to Baghdad, to the peace talk, we got wiped out. A brother who writes about it, I saw his book a little while ago. Al-Jahiz, get this book.
Al-Jahiz, yes.
Jahiz,
Glory of the
it's called Al-Jahiz by Jahiz. And he writes 9 short books. They call it books then. We would call it a long essay today. But one of it was called, remember this 8th century Iraq, right?
Right.
You know what the title of the book is? The Superiority of the Black Race over the White.
Over the white race. Yeah, I have that book.
Ain't that good, bro? So you on it. So to see where our thinking was in the 8th century, because we had already encountered this thing. We knew there was something different coming at us out of the Caucasus Mountains. You know? This is before he blew up big into Europe. We know them as the Germatics, the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths, and before that, the mixed breed ones, the Hittites and the Hyksos and the Greeks and the Romans. They were all mixed with us, those early ones. But then the Germatics that came out of the document, call it the Oxus River. And it's hard to find it, right? Because the Arabs changed the name from the Oxus River to something else. But it's up in the Caucasus Mountains. And that's where the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths come from. And so when the brothers are talking about being Moors, we never call ourselves Moors. The Romans call us that. And Moors is simply the Anglican, the Anglo-Saxon Anglicization of the Roman word for black, which was Marouche. But that's cool. All they were saying, we were black people. I love being black. And if anybody argue about the brownness, brown ain't nothing but a shade of black. So the people, those are the 2 biggest nations. They had other smaller ethnic nations, which we call tribal groupings. There's nothing wrong with being a tribe. You're just describing your ethnic nation, your extended family. But those extended family came together and they made up a larger ethnic nation, like the Gudamas and the Caramantes. We find the Caramantes later down in Ghana, and then again in Jamaica in large numbers. But in the studying of history, we have to be willing to not act like white folks. We're not trying to be superior to anybody because we don't have to, because we are. All we have to try to do is tell the truth to ourselves about ourselves. Tell the truth to ourselves about ourselves. We don't have to make up nothing. Our history is so fantastic and so dynamic. Like my brother's from St. Lucia. One of his big research needed to be, who were the black people on St. Lucia before Columbus came? See, the white man had bamboozled us with all these Asiatics. He tried to make everybody in the Caribbean and in North America, Central South America, before Columbus, Asians. That's not true. We were fighting a war with the Asiatics for 10,000 years before the white folks got here. Now, some of them amalgamated with us, and some became our friends and family, but some remained our enemies right up until today. you know. But that's the history. We have to study the history. History isn't something that was done, and the research on history isn't something that has been completed. This is the job for the young Black men and women throughout the world today, is to uncover the history of your ancestors. And the main reason you must do that, and then we'll come back to the religion question, because you are your ancestors. When your mama and daddy fell in love, got in that bed, and yes, they got into a bed on a couch or somewhere, and they had sex, and they enjoyed it. And in that enjoyment, that sperm and that eggs united, and they recreated themselves. When your parents had you, they gave birth to themselves.
Exactly.
And that has been done from the beginning of time, from the first Black woman, when the universe decided to be a Black woman. From that point on, she kept recreating themselves. We are the ancestors we call libations to. What we confuse is the experiences of ourselves in a time before this time, and we think that was a different self. No, that was the same self doing something at a time before this time. Then it gave birth to itself so that you exist as yourself in this time. I hope that's not confusing.
Is that what reincarnation is?
But this is beyond reincarnation. You never had to reincarnate, because when those two lovers heard that explosion and started calling God's name, they were creating themselves. That's the only way humans are.
I mean, that makes so much sense.
Because it's
like
the
a
most
carnation.
undisputable sacred science there is. Because I always ask people, where did you get the baby from? Did it drop from heaven? Did it grow in the field? Did it start delivered in the field? No. It came through the womb of a woman after having been seeded by a man. That makes the man and the woman that aspect of the divine that creates. And that's the only way the divine creates. Because that makes you a part of God itself. You understand where I'm coming from? That's African culture.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't call that religion because it's bigger than religion. See, religion means to bind back. Bind back to what? What I'm telling you right now. As an understanding of reality. But they don't want us to have that reality because they've created a reality where they can scare you to death in submitting to slavery for fear of your life. If you know no one could take your life, what then would you be afraid of? You understand?
Yeah, totally understand.
Each of these temples or houses or bodies that we have will wear down and wear up, but the energy that is we don't wear down. And even the body, when you wear it down, you put it in the ground, it rottens and it goes back to the very basic elements, the dirt that you were made up of. Look at us, we look so beautiful and pretty, but we're just dirt. Think of it now. Every bit of vegetable you eat grew from the dirt once water and sunlight was added, right? Whatever the seed was, it had to absorb the dirt, which we call minerals and elements. And that's all we are. When we die, we break back down into the same dirt, minerals and elements. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
That's at the level of matter.
100%.
But at the level of energy, we just keep on going. It's like body hopping. When there's a new baby come, we hop on in and start a new cycle. We are the ancestors you pour the libations to. Because when your mama and daddy gave birth to you, they gave birth to themselves. And when your 4 grandparents gave birth to them, they gave birth to themselves. And when your 8 grandparents gave birth to them, great parents gave birth to themselves. And when your 16 great gave birth, they gave birth to themselves. So who are you? You are the very ancestors you talk about. You are just in a new dynamic temple that we don't take very good care of And that's why we get sick and broken down, and we're so busy dealing with the sickness and the illness, we can't deal with solving the fundamental problems that face us in a day-by-day world. And so the enemy keeps shiving us poison.
Hmm.
You know, little McDonald's here, little Burger King here, little
Yes.
Thai food here, little Chinese food here. You know, and we keep stopping up the poison because it tastes so good because they got sugar in everything. We sweeten the poison and they'll eat forever.
Mm.
So, it's fundamental. Bring everything back to fundamental. Why are we fighting to do anything so that we'll be able to provide food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security for ourselves and our children and our greater group? How do we do that? We must take control of land, labor, and resources wherever we are in the world. When we do that, we must take control of the economics, the politics, and the culture system that governs land, labor, and resources, so that you don't beg anybody, anywhere, for food, clothing, shelter. That's what this is all about. This stuff confused it with a bunch of crazy, fancy, esoteric ideas and concepts. God don't look like nothing because there's nothing called God to look like nothing in that sense. Most African language that I've studied, the word for God means the totality of everything. Makes up the divine, and you're a part of that totality. The white man sees himself as fragments looking for a totality. The African culture saw themselves as a totality trying to keep from being fragmented. That's why they fragmented us. They know they got us in a weakened position.
Mm.
Am I making sense? You
Yes.
understand?
That's right.
Yes.
So when we talk about
1,000%. 1,000%.
Obia, Voodoo, Yoruba, Santeria, Candomblé, Bocaria, Lukomi. We're talking about the totality that is trying to protect itself from the fragment. And you're up against the fragment that's trying to make itself a totality. When we get clear on that, we'll know how to defeat this thing that we're up against. But you don't defeat it by becoming it. That's the mistake that Nkrumah and the others made. But it was a mistake. That was the only pathway available to them. But because of their work, more pathways has opened us for your generation to understand how we were able to survive in St. Lucia of this day. How come St. Lucia an all-white country? They would love for it to be that. But some but the black folks there allowed themselves to survive. What is that something? It wasn't Christianity, even though we did it in the church. But if you go into the black church in St. Lucia, it's not the same as the white people's church in St. Lucia.
Well, that's a little bit about St. Lucia, Baba.
Uh-huh.
St. Lucia is like majority Catholic, Protestant, but it had what we call the Kili. Now the Kili had to do with the worship of Shango and the different religions from West Africa. But Roman Catholicism stamped that out. And these things slowly got relegated to demonic and sin. So the population, as you said, regarded, still do. I'll tell you something. Recently, one bright morning in the capital, everyone was on their way in the city, and they noticed that there was a dead cat, a kind of a brownish and white cat in a saucer with candles around it, and there was different markings on the ground. Now, this is not a thing that's uncommon, really, because sometimes there are court cases and people find frogs with their mouths sewn. So everyone was scared and they called the police. There was a commotion. People were gathered around, looking on. Everyone was scared. And, so you can see this thing is still alive and well in the islands. But the society has been transformed to be ignorant of it, to not understand it, because these are tools people use because there is a lot of inequality. And to get justice, it comes with finance. So certain times people go back to our original stuff to get things done.
But I'm going to come to that a little bit. It's a game of psychology and science. They know that wouldn't hurt nobody. But they know that they're dealing with an ignorant enemy of truth. And so they could present something that would create confusion for them. And that's exactly what the brothers or sisters who did that did. And to let them know that there's something in your midst that you don't control. And it makes you scared when you see any symbol of it. But our power is in our reality. Spirituality is your reality. If you have a spirituality and it's separate from your reality, you don't have spirituality. Spirituality is your reality. If they got us dealing with spookality and calling the spookality spirituality. And so we have to be careful. Let me answer this question real quick to this young man, then we're going to come back to the religion question. He said, can you expand more on how the Moors got the name from the European? Also, what was the treaty that was signed in America with the Moors? Those are the same little head games people playing. So I'm not going to answer it. You do the research. If you can formulate that question like that for me, to go and do the research for you, you can do that research for yourself. When that so-called treaty was signed, who was in charge of the Muslim world, including North Africa? And it was the Turks under the Ottoman empires. They didn't sign no treaty with no Moors. They signed it with the Turkish Ottoman Empire. Okay? Now the white man may have called anybody who was a Muslim back in the 1800s a Moor.
A Moor. That's right.
They were doing it being Muslim, right? Not being black. And so they didn't sign any treaty with us. They signed a treaty with the Ottoman Empire, who had defeated us already. Now, some of us joined them over the part of their armies and so forth, but we weren't in charge of a damn thing by that time in history in North Africa. That's why you got all them white people running around North Africa saying, I'm Algerian and I'm Libyan. These are the descendants of the Turks, of the Romans, and of the German Visigoths who invaded just before the Arabs invaded. The Germans overthrowing the Roman Empire. We never talk about the German invasion that came through Spain. They talk about, we conquered Spain and stayed there 700. Why did we go to Spain? We were running somebody out of North Africa that had come out of Spain into North Africa and been there for a few hundred years, trampling the Roman Empire. And they're called, the Visigoth was to the east. These are the German ones called the Ostrogoth. Okay? And so do that research. That word Moor comes from the Greek word morush, which means black, and the Roman takes that word and calls it Morish, and then the white Anglo-Saxon English people call Morish Moors. It means brown, it means tan, it means black, depending on whether the Spanish is using it, the French is using it, or the British is using it. So why we keep playing head games to ourselves? This is one of the easiest words in the world to look up. But you know why we're playing the head games? Because we don't want to take the responsibility for being African. So let's be some mythical little victorious little kingdom that don't exist anymore.
Thank you.
Except in white people books, Yes, there were black people in Europe during that period of time. There were black people in Europe before Islam came on the scene. Okay? And then they're going to try to say, well, we can show that the Moors came out of Egypt. Stop the foolishness. Stop playing with yourself. You know?
Yeah, I've heard that so many times. It gives me a headache.
Study Noble Drew Ali. Drew Ali, like Elijah Muhammad and Marcus Garvey and others, was trying to find an identity for us to help us fight against the white oppression and racism in the Western Hemisphere. And so they got what they could. Drew Ali went to Egypt and he met these blacks who were Muslims, and they tell him, this is who we are. And so that's what he brought back, that we are the Moors that fought into Spain. Yes, they were the descendants of some of those people, but that's not who we were. Who were we before we became Muslims? Islam don't start until the 6th century. I mean, we don't exist, and it doesn't invade North Africa until the 8th century. Okay. And the people that history is calling Moors were those who were mixed. They weren't just, yes, many of them were still black, but many of them were mixed with the Arab invaders, the Roman invaders, the Greek invaders, the Germanic invaders. You hear what I'm saying? So you want to deal with the truth? Deal with all the rapists that invade our land and molested our women. Are you afraid to, because you're calling them daddy? You're afraid to call them the rapists that they were? The Romans raped and molested and mutilated our women and our men. The Greeks did the same thing. So the Greeks came first into North Africa, mutilated, raping, and stealing our raw materials. Then the Romans came for the same reason. They didn't come there because they loved Africa. They came there because they needed raw materials. They needed iron. They needed gold. They needed copper. They needed olive. They needed other raw materials that was in our land. That's why the Greeks invaded. That's why the Romans invaded. And each one of those invaders raped millions of our people over the centuries. They were there. All right, hundreds of years of Greek and Roman occupation, then the Germanic occupation, and then the half-breed, the mixed breeds we call the Arabs, who was mixed with Romans and Greeks. Then they invaded. And then they're followed by the Mameluke Turks and the Seljuk Turks out of the Caucasus Mountain. And then the Kurds and the Ottoman Turks. So by the time you get to this treaty that you're talking about, that's who's running North Africa, not black folks. The black people who were there didn't all become Muslims and didn't go along with that group you call the Moors. They fought that group, but you don't talk about them. They now live in Mali. They now live in Senegal. They now live in Nigeria. They live in Chad. They live in the Central African. You want to find the person who the white man called the Moors, go to West Africa. But they don't call themselves Moors. But these are the people. So study the history. Don't be afraid. Read Ibn Khaldun. And there are other writers writing during that time. But go to West Africa and listen to the oral historians. Get on the plane. You got money to go party in Dominican Republic and go party in this place and that place. Save your little money and go hang out in Senegal for a few weeks. You know, go hang out in Mali for a few weeks. Let them tell you the history. Study the history of the Dogon. It's written, and there's a good series. The United Nations, the UNESCO 8-volume history on Africa is written mostly by Africans. Buy that 8 volumes. It's expensive, so buy the volume at a time. The UNESCO history on Africa. Let me see what the exact title is. Okay. It's called The General History of Africa.
Yeah, I think it's World History Series,
Yeah. The General History of Africa. This is volume 6 here.
That's why we married.
And Sheikh Anta Diop is in here. Many of the great scholars of Africa is telling our story. It's 8 volumes. Buy this.
Yeah.
You know? And yes, we must learn from the internet and the little bits and chips people put on there, but that should only stimulate us to do real work. get to this history. We don't have to
Right.
make up a history for ourselves. We are
Right.
the most extraordinary and powerful people in the world. The only civilization that's ever existed, even in China and Japan, was created by us. Okay? And Vietnam and Korea, the civilization that they look back to is all black. North America, we was here before the Asiatic crossed Bering Strait. We don't have to apologize. We everywhere. We are the aborigine of the planet Earth. That's not something to get in a huff about and fuss with each other and talk about, I ain't from Africa. Well, even if you came 10,000 years earlier, where the hell do you think you came from? You know? Because you
Yeah, because I'm hearing that a lot too, Baba-Prof.
We didn't put ourselves on that slave ship. We lost the war.
Yes.
We were fighting a war for many, many decades. But gun technology was the margin of the Europeans' victories and his diseases that his body brought. His disease killed more people than the gun, both in Africa and in the Americas. His disease wiped out millions. He had syphilis. There was no syphilis here in this hemisphere. He had pneumonia. There was no pneumonia virus in this hemisphere. He had influenza. There was no influenza virus. There was no common cold virus. He brought all of these diseases that destroyed our lung capacity to survive and killed us by the millions. He brought smallpox. He brought syphilis. He brought gonorrhea. He brought all these diseases. You understand? And it wiped us out by the millions. His diseased body. He's got another new disease now that's ravaging the so-called gay community, but they want to call it monkeypox. Try to relate it to Africa. Well, I ain't seen nobody in Africa suffering from it. You know, they're like AIDS. They say AIDS came from some green monkey, but AIDS, the people suffering from it was white male homosexuals for the most part until they spread it to the rest of the world. So I don't want to deal with them and their perversion, but just come and focus on our thing. Study history, it will erase the mystery. This is a good question that the brother asked. Can you expand on when and how the Moors got the name? Look at the Moorish invasion, but first just look up the name Moors and do the etymology of the word, and you'll see what the roots of the word is. Then do the history of the Romans invasion into North Africa. And you see that it was the black people that lived in Algeria and Tunisia that called themselves Afrika. And all that was just an ethnic family name. But that's what the Romans encountered there. So the Romans would say in their literature, we're going to Afriland. Afrika, Ka is their acronym for land. We're going to Afriland or Afrikland, where the blacks live, where the Marouche live. And that Marouche is the word that becomes the Moors. So we're going to Africa where the black people live. That's all they were saying in their language. But do the work. Don't just listen to me, or you don't even believe me. Prove that I'm wrong. And I guarantee you, you'll prove me right. And you will enlighten yourself in the process. You know? And it has been, but then when we get to Egypt is so many years older than Greece and Rome, than anything. And Egypt is a baby. South Africa and the Great Zimbabwe is older than Egypt. There's a book called...
See? I tell you, Fufu.
It's called the, where is it? It's not the land of the gods. Something of the gods. I didn't think about that book, but it's here. It'll pop up and I'll pull it up for you in a minute. And in South Africa, chiseled in the stone that comes from the volcano, almost 50,000 years before Kemet, is the Ankh with Ra in the circle. That messes up everything you know about Kemet, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's exactly. We had that conversation yesterday.
and rise in South Africa 1,000 years earlier. That's just messing up everything we think we know. You see? And so what we've got to do is be careful about talking about beginnings coming to religion. Again, the word is an anglicized Greek word, re, to do over, and ligio, to bind. So you're binding back. What are you binding back to? You're binding back to the wisdom of your ancestors. That's all the religion should do. Give you a body of information that binds you back to the wisdom of your ancestors. So if used appropriately, it's not a bad thing. White folks are using religion appropriately. They got white gods, white prophets, white saviors. That's what they're supposed to do. The body of information, they took most of that from Africa, but they assigned it to themselves. We get in it, and we still assigning it to them, and then worshiping them, because they present your mother and father's information in a different plate with a different seasoning on it and another kind of soup, and tell you it's theirs. And then you reject the formulation of your ancestors, which is helpful to you, and you're eating the soup that's been formulated to be helpful to somebody else. And the somebody else, when they help themselves, is from eating you. So if you're going to eat from the bowl that helps them, you're going to be eating and destroying yourself. Your culture, your history, your value. There's a timeline that's done by a brother in the UK. His name is Paul Obina. And Paul's been working on this thing for about 30, 40 years, and he keeps improving it. You know, Paul Obina Wilson, he's a Nigerian brother. And this is an extraordinary timeline. And I just want to read some of the early things on the timeline, right? So, and he covers everything.
Okay, please do.
He covers rhythm, spiritual awareness, old pictures, imagination, courageous, and all kinds of stuff. But I just want to look at some of the timeline dates when things are occurring. You know. And so we'll come to where, well, we'll start off, he starts with when he gets to a place called Naptoplio, the world's oldest, and it's called the Astronomical Calendar. It was developed in pre-dynastic Kemet around 7000 BC and was oriented to the heliacal rising of the constellation Sahu, aka Orion. Okay. And this is at a place in southern Egypt, going near Chad, in what would now be in the Sudan, at the borders of the Sudan and Chad. It's called Naptoplio. And there's a couple of good books written on Naptoplio. Boy, my brain ain't kicking it tonight. That's because I rushed from driving. I want y'all to know, my wife said, don't you be rushing. You're going to be late. I was doing 80 or 90 to get here on time. So, you know, your brain is like, okay, you got to kind of get back down. But if we go back to 5000 BC, right, and we're looking at the zodiacal cycle that our people use, which is 1,460 years, and then the lunar cycle, which is 1,805 years, and then there's no Greek and Romans yet. So at this time, we're like the Kemetic culture is generating and using a profound comprehension of and a reference for nature. So you deal with the first four netters. Now, netters is supposed to be the gods, right? But that's our claim as white people missed again. Netters are not gods, right? Now, the netter they call Shu is air. The netter they call Tefnut, that's moisture. The netter they call Geb, that's earth. The netter they call Nut, that's sky, meaning the planetary bodies and so forth. And so what we got to not do is be guilty of the same thing they're guilty of, which is being ignorant. of reality. So what our people are doing when they're creating what we call the first religion, they're simply explaining the laws of nature to themselves. Okay. So in the first book, not the first book, but the oldest book we know, written on a religious script, is called the Pyramid Text. This is older by tens of thousands of years than the Bible, Torah, or Quran, or the Rig Veda, or the Vedic Hymns, and any of the ones in India. And that book says, this is the opening passage, the Genesis story says, I create myself, this is Amen, what we call Amen, which simply means that which is unknowable, that which is hidden. Our ancestors wrote and said that this energy says, I create myself out of myself. I cause existence to exist so that existing might exist. And when I realized that I existed, I being Amen, Ma'at was at my side, meaning I'm the masculine principle. When I recognized myself to even be in existence, the feminine principle was at my side already. Truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, and reciprocity. And then Amen goes on in the pyramid text, and he says, I coughed up Tefnut. No, I coughed up Shu. And Shu, as I was telling you, is the air, right? And I coughed up Tefnut, which is the moisture, and the air meaning the gases, right? And that the air and the moisture, the gases and the moisture, that mixture created Earth. That means all the minerals and the energy of the universe converged and created the planet Earth being one of them. And then I gave birth to Nut. That's the other planetary bodies made up of all the energy, minerals, matter, and so forth. And then he goes on and says, I created everything that my heart desired. And then I, who's now become Amen Ra, I expanded in it. Meaning everything that I create have me in it. I expanded in it. So everything is me, and I am everything. And then when he goes further, he talks about Ptah. Ptah is symbolized by a little hill rising up out of a mountain. So that's the creation of matter. And that water out of which it comes is liquid matter. So this is a dissertation way back then in quantum physics. Okay. And then above Ptah rises Ra, energy. The sun is only a symbol of energy. So now you got energy and matter. And out of the energy and matter comes the life form we know. It gives birth to a Sar and a Set and Shu and Tefnut and Set. And they give life to all other living creatures on earth. And that's our ancestors interpreting the law of nature for themselves back then. What the white man is calling his science is his interpretation of the literature that he stole from us, that he have in the Vatican and all of his great museums and universities around the world like Harvard and Oxford. All they're doing is translating and interpreting our literature. And that is producing his technology and his science. So you want to find your spirituality? Western science is your spirituality. But he got you dangling with spookality. Want to see ghosts floating by, motherships in the sky. Your spirituality is your comprehension of your reality.
Dangling.
Your spirituality is your comprehension of your reality. The fundamental laws of nature is what the Africans was calling the laws of God, as they discerned it through observation and contemplation over hundreds of thousands of years, seeing repetition. Even our repetition may have taken 20,000 years or 30,000 years. After multiple repetition, they would declare that a law. because it keeps repeating itself.
Right.
Some may repeat itself after a year, some after 6 months, some after 24 hours. So out of that understanding, we invented the calendar and the clock. Okay. You look at the sun and you study the movements and you come up with the 24 hours. You look at the moon and you study the movement, you come up with the 28 days or the 30 days. But we invented the calendar, we invented the clock, we invented what they're calling time. In order for us to measure our expansion in nature. We measure the energy we give off before we dissipate in the forms we originally find ourselves. But before we dissipate, we recreate ourselves as our children. You then recreate us again as our grandchildren, and then recreate us as our great-grandchildren, and it just goes on and on to infinity. And if you go backwards, you go back to the very ultimate first occasion when the human existed as a manifestation of nature itself. Cosmology and ecology. That's what our people were studying. So, like the brother in St. Lucia was talking about the different anomalies one will leave on the road, like a frog with its mouth sewed up. It's trying to say people need to stop talking and stop making noise if they don't know what they're talking about. Or something might happen to you. Those are symbols. But it ain't gonna do nothing for nobody, except psychologically.
It's symbolic, yeah.
Okay? Because if we were gonna do all of that, we'd have gotten rid of the white man long ago. What's gonna get rid of the white man is to become intelligent about who you are again, and intelligent about how to use the laws of the universe in our favor again, intelligent about how to use science and mathematics which we invented. Even the Greeks, under their boy Plato, in a book he wrote called Phaedrus, said the Ethiopian, and Ethiopia is not an African word either, that's a Greek word that means black face or burnt face. But we use it, and that's cool, I understand. Let's not get confused. Right? And so Plato, in his writing, the Phaedrus, P-H-E-D-R-U-S, and you can find a reference to it in the History of Mathematics by Kajari, Chapter 1, Introduction, Paragraph 2, where he says that the Ethiopian has given the world all of its sciences. This is their main man. Why don't they teach us that in school, right? This is Plato. And he writes it. And leaves it for posterity, but they don't put that book in the school.
Yeah, I never heard of it. I absolutely never heard of that.
They give you the Republic, which is Aristotle writing about Plato. But they don't give you Phaedrus, which is Plato writing about himself. And he says that the Africans, I use Africa in place of Ethiopian, gave the world all of its sciences. And then he starts naming them. He said the first great science is arithmetic. The second great science is geometry. The next great science is medicine. The next great science is astronomy. And he goes on and on. And he said, but the greatest science of all that the Ethiopian gave to the world is the science of writing itself. This is their boy. This is Plato. You know?
Hey, Baba, can I ask you a question? Didn't the Greek god, I don't know which ones it was it like Zeus? Two of them, from what I can remember, would have to go recharge in Ethiopia too?
No, all of them.
Oh, all of them would have to go recharge in Ethiopia.
That's in Homer. It's in Homer, the first book. I mean, Homer wrote the first, plagiarized the first book off of African information for them. And that's the Odyssey and the Iliad. And in the Odyssey and Iliad, Homer said all of the gods of Greece had to return to Africa in every season to renew themselves.
Wow.
If you just use their literature, they'll clear everything up for you. And then you got Herodotus, who's supposed to be the father of history. his entire book 2 on the philosophy of history is all about the superiority of African technology. That Bill's brief. So now that we are reading this, Herodotus didn't know what he was talking about. But when I was little, he was the father of history. But now that we've read his document, you go, you don't know what he's talking about. But that's your father of history.
There is a book, Baba, I don't know if you know it. Cold Winds from the North by Volendela Wobogo.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I haven't read it, but I've heard of it.
Oh, this book is beautiful. Well, I personally am a bibliophile, and we have say close to 400 books in our study, and we have authors. We have Plato, we have Socrates, we have Wobogo, we have Diop, we have Nobles, we have Tudika Kilimanjaro University Press, we have Robin Walker.
Oh yeah, Robin is my main man.
So we have a lot of strong authors. What we actually do, we're actually teaching African history and spirituality to the youth, and we're trying to get into the schools and trying to build an organization. The person you see right here, the elder that just came on, he's actually the one that introduced me to African spirituality, because I was a Bible dread. Because Rastafari. Yes. We came out from the Congolese.
And guess what? Those stories in the Bible are not enemy to us. They're transliterations in somebody else's culture of our ancient body of information. But since they didn't fully understand they could only translate at the level of minimum interpretation for themselves. And at that time in Europe, 99% of the people were illiterate. So this was only a few in the upper elite circle that could even read this literature. And they were fundamentally illiterate when it came to African literature. And it was some of us interpreting this to some degree for them, to give them something, thinking we give them enough to leave us alone. But it didn't work.
I had a question for you, Baba. A question about the similarity between Shaka Zulu and Menelik II, and him building the modern Ethiopia, and Shaka uniting his people, but he uniting the people under Christianity.
Well, Menelik made a fundamental mistake in trying to solve a problem, and Christianity got into Ethiopia. Ethiopia was not a Christian state, and it was black women, and I forgot the sister who led it, who burnt all of the original Christian churches. And the only one that survived, the Queen Mother's Wrath, the Church of Miriam, which is still there today, and they don't allow any females in the Church of Miriam.
I heard about that.
There's two churches of Miriam, the original one, which is a very small chapel. And so that's why, what's his name, who went to the mountains, the King Lalibela, went up in the mountains. And even today, the pathway to get to Lalibela, you can barely get one car up there at a time. So they could defend that pathway against the Queen Mother, who was trying to destroy the Christian interpretation of their spiritual system. It wasn't the information they were trying to destroy. It was the interpretation. See, a religion is an interpretation of a body of knowledge by a particular culture. What we call Christianity, even though we Ethio-sized it, but these were black people in the Roman kingdom, which we call the Byzantine period, was mainly in Turkey when Turkey was still black. These are the people that created what we call Christianity, which was then state ideology that became religion. Okay? And they were trying to appease the Roman leadership to keep them from destroying Africa. So they gave them something. They took our body of knowledge and they synthesized it to fit the Roman culture. That body of knowledge they synthesized for the Romans is what we're calling Christianity. But it contained information on how to organize yourself as a group, how to develop your character, how to develop your inner self and your outer self. That's all these religions do if you follow them. Praying is a form of meditation, and actualization. But you must make the religion fit the culture of the people that's using it. Christianity was not designed for African culture. It was designed by African culture for European culture. And it was never designed to give them a totality of an understanding of the universe, but to give them enough of an understanding that they would not be an enemy that would destroy the rest of Africa. But that didn't work. They took this, better organized themselves, and wiped our behinds out. At least in terms of having control of our world. They could never wipe us out because we are nature itself. We can't be destroyed. And the trouble we have that we are arguing about today around sociology and psychology that involves our youth out there killing each other because they've been so disrupted and bamboozled and injured and scarred up that they're full of hate and anxiety. That fire that they represent isn't 10% of our population, but we're allowing the white man to make us pay more attention to that 10% than we're paying to the 90%. We're not doing none of those things. And we begin to then define our whole people by the 10%. And I'm being liberal saying 10%. I don't even think it's 10% of that group that they've crippled by throwing them in prison, by molesting them sexually, by abusing them psychologically and physically, by not educating them in the school system, leaving them out here to develop at the level of an animal instead of to develop as a level of a spiritual being. And so we don't understand that he understands our science. Everything that he calls science is our science. You study in ancient Kemet where the books were left, we already got trigonometry, we already got geometry, we already got algebra. If you don't believe it, look at the Rhine Mathematical Papyrus and problem 16, and you'll see them solving a problem with an unknown. The algebra is already there. You'll see the right triangle, and you'll see other triangles. We study most of what Western mathematics is based on is all in one little book that's in the museum in Russia, called the Rhine Mathematical Papyrus. Well, now it's in the museum in Britain. The Rhine, the Moscow Mathematical Papyrus in Moscow. The Rhine Mathematical Papyrus is in the British Museum, and you'll find it on the second floor in the Nubian exhibit in a corner without much explanation of what it is. But they'll sell a book that they've translated into English on it down in the library. So that's why it's important that we do the research and that we tell the people the truth. You got poor people going to church every Sunday, praying to Jesus for salvation, and coming back home, and the husband can't find work because he was trained and poorly treated, so he's on alcohol or on drugs. The mother's in a quandary trying to raise the children that they produced when they were young people and thought they had a possibility in the future. She's sick from overwork. The children are going into the streets to survive, and what the enemy has put out there for them to survive is to sell drugs to one another as an easy way. And then that creates a whole cycle of violence to sustain yourself. And yet it's those same people who are going into the church every Sunday saying, "Oh Lord, save me." And the Lord isn't doing anything for any of them. But they go back every Sunday and they go to mosque every Friday. That all sounds pretty and good. And you look good, line up together, praying together. but you go back home to the same poverty, and you can't provide food, clothing, or shelter. Allah ain't helping you do it. Jesus ain't helping you do it. Jehovah ain't helping you do it. Buddha ain't helping you do it. It's not what the hell any of that was designed for. You know, that was designed in the way it's given to you to keep you from challenging those who control food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security, by minimizing your ability to recognize who your enemy truly is and who your allies really are. This thing fundamentally is about food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security. With all these churches in the world, we got hungry people. With all these god and goddesses, and the African ones in there too. The ones that
talk about it, Baba. Talk about it.
Mary and Ogun ain't worth a damn either if they don't stop providing some food, clothing, shelter, if they don't start getting our young people out of prison, if they don't start stopping the murder and the rape and the plunder of our young girls, then what the hell is any of it worth? So that tells you this religion thing is spookism, not realism. It's spookism. What this is about is the fundamental basic sciences that make up human reality being mastered by me and you, so that we can provide food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security, control land, labor, and resources, and be in charge of the economic, politics, and culture where we live. That's what religion and spirituality should do. If it ain't doing that, put that shit in the garbage. Nothing but decoration that becomes an anchor around your neck.
Exactly. They look good, but like you said, when they leave the service, they go right back home to the same old poor life again.
Someone asked the
Not
question,
following anything that they just went to church.
it's characters and how black people are using it currently. Answer that question yourself. What do you think of the Bible and how we're using it? Does it look like we're doing pretty good with it? Even the black middle class, most of our children. Did y'all see the American Awards where our women came out dressed in like prostitutes and whores?
The BET Awards?
Whatever, all of them. The men are dressed like they're all into some white gay organization. What? Listen. And those are the images of those who have money and power being postulated before our youth to imitate. And all of them got a big cross, gold or silver, around their neck.
Yeah.
Tell me, where in the Bible any of what I see is given as appropriate behavior. But yet the very symbol of your salvation is being flaunted by the very purveyors of your death. So I have to figure, is the cross they're wearing the one that they put on the grave, or is the cross they're wearing the one that's supposed to show up on Easter Sunday?
And you know, to add on to that, Baba, they do all of that and they get on stage, and what's the first thing they think? Oh, I want to thank God. You know, I want to thank God for.
I don't call my woman the B word.
Yeah.
I don't call the brother the N word. I don't talk about selling all the dope I can, shooting all I can. And then I'll come and say I give thanks to God because I made money for doing that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Everybody's up there applauding, not realizing what they just did in those few seconds with their minds and their spirits.
Right.
So when you are being informed by your enemy's culture and your enemy's behavior was to murder, rape, pillage, plunder, and genocide you, then you become your murderer, your rapist, your plunderer, and your genocider yourself. Because a person's culture should be the thing that saved you from genocide.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not using your culture, you're using somebody's culture. And if you're being genocided, you need to ask yourself fundamentally why. You don't see the Jews trying to worship Nazism, do you?
Right.
Don't be arguing about, oh, they got our identity.
Of
Whatever they
course
got,
not.
They're using it like magic. Okay?
Mhm.
They got your knowledge.
And it's
they're
working
using it.
too.
They're using it for their salvation. We need to use it for our salvation. Like the brothers who say the Hebrew Israelite, I can understand and appreciate that. Some of us that too, but why are you fighting me on the streets going to New York? Go to El Alcana, buy a ticket, and go to the promised land. Leave me alone.
Baba, in your research, would you say the original Jews, the original persons they call the Jews?
I'm not even interested in the original person they call the Jews. They're not big enough for discussion except a point of reference to make a joke. We have a history of 1 billion years. And if we just count the millions of years, we're going to take one little ragtime experience that white folks have poked in our face and make it the discussion of our lives. We need to stop that. Tell me about Shango. Tell me about Ogun. Tell me about the gods in the kingdom of Namibia. Tell me about the gods of South Africa and the religion and experience of those people who lived thousands and tens of thousands of years before anything happened in the desert called Israel. Let's have a real discussion about Africa. Yes, those people who were Hebrew Israelites probably were African. And I say probably because if they're Africans and we had just been invaded by the Hyksos, and the time period they're talking about them leaving Egypt and going northeast. If you're a black man, why are you leaving Egypt and going northeast instead of running south? Something's wrong with that discussion.
Yeah.
Let me say that again, because a lot of people be making these things don't ask the question. Kemet is invaded by some people called the Hyksos. They sit on a small part of our northern sector of the Nile Valley for nearly 400 years, off and on. We're driving them back, they're coming back. But then we wipe them out. We drive them out. Now, all of them don't leave, because they've been there 400 years. They done married into our women, they done raped into our women, and they're living there. They got business and everything. They lose political power, but they don't leave. You hear me? So this black army is coming from the south. Some of them leave. They drive out the top boys and their armies. Why is the Hebrews running north with them and not running south to us? Answer that question.
That's a good one.
That's a powerful question.
Say that again because you were breaking up, Baba.
Why are the Hebrew Israelites running north with the Hyksos, who we are running out of the country, and not running south to us to say, thank you, brothers, for saving us from these Hyksos who were occupying the northern sector of the country? That's why we got to study history. Bible ain't no history. It makes some reference to history, you know, and it even mentions Taharka in 3 different places as being the king of Egypt and all the world who was coming to save Jerusalem, save Israel. If your Bible says that Pharaoh is the king of Egypt and all the world, why don't you see him as king of Egypt and all the world? You see, you believe in the Bible.
Right.
And if Abraham come from Ur of the Chaldees, that's where Kuwait is today. What is he running from? Why is he running south? Something is coming after him. That's the white people invading what is called the Tigris-Euphrates Valley. And so this metaphorical people who's supposed to be under Abraham runs down to Africa for safety. And then he wasn't a religious man because he's a liar. He brought his beautiful wife according to his own story, Sarah. And when the Pharaoh says he's a beautiful woman, says, oh yeah, you can have her. Pharaoh's getting ready to handle his business. When God came and said, no, that's a married woman. So who's the God man, Pharaoh or Abraham? Abraham was a liar who was ready to whore down his wife just for his survival. And it's the God of the Pharaoh said, no, that woman is married. Touching her would be wrong. And he brings her back to her husband and say, why did you do this? Why would you do this to me? Make me commit a crime by being with your wife. Why would you do this?
Wow,
So
I never looked at that story like that. Yeah.
So who's the God man? The Pharaoh or Abraham? One is a liar and a disrespecter of his woman and a pimp, and the other is a God man that give them shelter and safety.
That was pimping. That's basically what pimping is, though. That's what he did. That's what it was.
And so when we relook these things past how we were told to look at it, let's look at it with our own open eyes. Yes, somebody got our body of knowledge. All these invasion into Northeast Africa, they're stealing our libraries, they're stealing our literature, and they're trying to figure out how could we construct civilizations like that? Well, we have to learn how to think like them. So those things we are calling religion started out as state ideologies that became religion once the capitalist ideology took control of state. Go back and you see that what I'm saying makes sense. Same thing with Islam. Prophet Muhammad was a man that ran the business of his wife Khadijah. Khadijah was a very wealthy woman who had caravans. Well, a caravan today would be a tractor-trailer trucking company, right? You're moving goods to and from markets in these large carriers. Instead of having camels, today you would have a tractor-trailer truck, a bunch of them. And so you go to the capital where the wealth is. That means Muhammad spent a lot of time in Kemet, and he learned the science, which we call the craft of the secret society. And he brought it back to his people. Who was his people? The Arab people. They were a mixture of black folks and the Greeks who had invaded us centuries earlier, but stayed on after their defeat by the Romans and amalgamated with us in the same way we see in Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic today. So there ain't nothing new on how those type of shades of people come up, And so Muhammad is trying to free them. But right after Muhammad's death, the white boy took over Islam. Islam had not been in the Arabs' hands since the 8th century. Those people that the British put in charge in Saudi Arabia and in Jordan after the First World War are supposed to be Arabs, but they themselves are mostly descended of the same Greeks. They call them the Hashemites and the Wahhabis. Okay? And that's why they could slaughter the black people, the Saudi Arabians, and slaughter the black people of Yemen, the way they've been doing for the last few years with the bombs and the missiles of America on behalf of America. While they're talking about they're the guardians of Islam. They're guarding a building called the Kaaba. Well, study ancient Kemetic literature. What does Ka means and what does Ba mean? The building is a symbol of a philosophical fundamental right out of African history.
Right. Wow.
When the Ka and the Ba comes together, you're the God man. Everybody got our thing trying to interpret to be their thing, vested in their culture, and usually a false history. Like
I was gonna say,
I'm a Sunni Muslim. That means I'm the follower of Muhammad. Well, study the history of Islam, and you see the Sunni Muslims was the one that started the family of Muhammad, and it was the Shia that saved Muhammad's family. So who's the real Muslim? I don't want to tackle me. I'm a Muslim in that I once studied that tradition and went to Mecca. I'm al-Hajj Amin Shahid. And I know the literature very well. And I know the history even better. So what we need to do, though, is stop having a discussion about Northeast Africa and that little piece of desert. And let's start having some discussion about Great Zimbabwe. And let's start having some discussion about the great Zulu nation and the Shona Nation in South Africa, the great Angolan, and Congo Nation. Let's have a discussion about the Cameroon. Let's have a discussion about the Akan people and their civilization and tradition. Let's have a discussion about the Ewe people and their civilization and tradition. Let's have a discussion about the people of Nigeria, the Benin people, the Yoruba people, the Igbo people. They have a greater history than anything that we keep referencing in a few hundred years in the desert where people are killing each other. The so-called Hebrew, the so-called Israelite, in their own literature, in their own book called Exodus, when they leave so-called Egypt, right, to go to the land of Canaan, they talk about how they slaughtered the men, women, and children and say that God told them to do it. That's what you want to identify with? That they were told by their leaders to kill all women that knew men, meaning any woman who was married and had sex with children, murder all them. Only save the virgins for yourself. Kill all the men to the last one, even kill their dogs and their chickens.
See?
This is
barbarian.
what those say. This is in your book.
But would you say, Baba, that ideology was that same ideology the Europeans, when they came into the New World?
That's right. The same thing. So read the book before we identify with this and say this is us back in the day. No, it wasn't. This was the same demon. Because if it was us, he'd be running south to meet the Liberation Army. We wouldn't be running north with the people we were chasing out of Africa. I just say just deal with that piece.
Yeah.
Ooh, that was a bombshell right there.
Because I have a book by Gaston Maspero, in fact 2 volumes. And one of them is the history of Egypt during the time of the Ptolemies.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about they bind the Jews out of slavery and having them write the Septuagint, but at the same time chasing the native Egyptians towards the south and making Alexandria more of a Greek and Jewish settlement in Egypt.
And remember, the word Jew wasn't even being used at the time because the word J don't come into the language until the 16th century.
Yeah.
So they weren't even using the word Jew. So, but the point is, we spent too much time discussing the invasion in Northeast Africa. I just said. And we spent too much time discussing the Arab invasion and the Turkish invasion in North Africa with this Moorish stuff. 3/4 of Africa we don't even discuss, and that's where most of us came from.
And that's African centered.
Yes. Do we want to discuss Congo? Do we want to discuss Uganda, the Ntoro people? Do we want to discuss the Kikuyu? Do we want to discuss the Shona? Do you want to discuss Great Zimbabwe? Do you want to discuss the Ewe, who tell you that they are the people from Kemet who made it all the way to West Africa and brought all of their shrines with them, and they're in Togo? You know? Do you want to look at a history that if you look at the American satellites that show you 2 rivers running from the Atlantic Ocean all the way over to the Nile River that's now underground, which meant we was going back and forth all the time, just like a person goes shopping in New York, but he lives down in Jacksonville, Florida.
Ayakwe talks a lot about the unity of Africa and Kemet, and also Dr. Fukiao. Dr. Fukiao speaks.
And Sheikh Diep is the greatest purveyor of the scholarship on that subject.
Yes.
Cultural unity of Africa, civilization of barbarism. But that's why people need to do is study our history. It will erase the enemy's mystery and let you work your black magic in your favor. Stop being afraid of black magic, because white magic ain't helping you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in the poverty you're in. But that made you glorify poverty. And that's why they pay our youth out of poverty to glorify poverty, So you will accept the poverty as being necessary for salvation. But he isn't waiting for poverty to be necessary for his salvation. And he's the one that brought you the formula of salvation. So we have to begin to study our history. Our religion, which we didn't have, Africans didn't have a religion. They have a culture and understanding of the world, which is based on cosmology and ecology. I'll show you just a good one. You live in ancient Kemet back in the day when black folks reigned. But somebody had to be the fisherman catching the fish. Somebody had to build the boat. Somebody had to build the sail, right? Somebody had to build the roads. Somebody had to till the fields. Somebody had to grow the wheat. Somebody had to grow the cotton. Somebody had to come up with the linen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So everybody can't be a priest. They didn't have a term priest. Harihem, whatever that word they use, were the scientists of the different areas. It is these scientists who we are calling priests, who the state took care of so that they could study how the world works and teach the masses. Hieroglyphics is nothing but a language system designed to convey knowledge to a population that was fundamentally illiterate in terms of reading, right? So how do you teach them about the laws of nature? You use the symbols out of nature that they work with every day. And so you have one group studying the sky. We call him an astronomer. Look, the fisherman ain't got time to study no damn sky. The farmer ain't got time for that. So the astronomer is your job. We pay you to do that. And then you come up with a system to teach that to me. So they came up with astrology as a way to teach astronomy to the masses. So that the masses understand their relationship to the rest of the things we call the heavenly bodies. And they come up with a language system, which is really a drawing system, that use symbols and animals out of nature to teach concepts, ideas, and principles to the masses that was represented by the behavior of these particular animals and insects in nature. And the white man was doing this. When you look at Leonardo da Vinci and the others, by now they've gotten hold of our knowledge and they're trying to teach it to their people, but their people are illiterate. So they teach them through paintings. The European paintings during the period of Renaissance should be called European hieroglyphs because they're telling stories about the history of the world. One story is about someone named Jesus who's having a dinner called the Last Supper. And he's sitting at a table. And he's sitting in the center of the 12 guys. 6 on this side, 6 on that side. And he's got a light around his head, right? And on one side of him, he's got 3 groups of 3s. And on the other side, he's got 3 groups of 3s. Look at any legitimate painting of Da Vinci's painting, and that's what you'll see, that these 3 groups are only talking to each other. Those 4 sets represent the 4 seasons, and the 12 represents the 12 months revolving around the sun, which is symbolized by Christ, and that's why he got the halo coming out of his head, because he's the sun. It's a solar drama, a scientific treaty being explained as an anthropomorphic religious document to the masses, or to at least the elite, whom they want, who are also ignorant, who they want to begin to learn this body of knowledge they've gotten from Africa. Did you all understand what I just told you?
Yes, Baba.
It's about the Last Supper.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. I get you.
What are your thoughts on Congo cosmology? You know what my thoughts on Congo cosmology is. Congo cosmology is African cosmology. So just throw the word Congo out of the room. It's just those group of people in that particular location interpreting the same thing I'm talking about.
Yeah, the Bantu.
Congo cosmology, what they call Bantu, Tantu, Mantu, Bantu. It ain't no different than the Zulu cosmology. Ain't no different than Kemetic cosmology. There's only one sun and one moon. They're only the planets we're able to see. There's only one nature that's producing the life and things that it does. All the cosmology is an explanation of our relationship to the things we call heavenly and the things we call earthly. Only difference in the explanation is the language and our location. So there ain't no difference between Congo cosmology and Yoruba cosmology. Yoruba might call it Shango and you might call it something else. And that's what we need to get clear on. Come from the European fragmentation into the African wholeness. And you'll really see the power you have. Let me show you how to take the Bible and play with it, right? They wrote this document and trying to rewrite our documents to try and train themselves using these stories. So they want to talk about reincarnation and resurrection. So they talk about this guy named Jesus, right? Who came to save the world. And that's the Heru story. Every child that's born is Heru, man and woman. Every one of us came to save the world. Okay? Look at the Jesus story. Let's just come to the end of days, right? Days about to be killed, right? And so in the so-called Hebrew scripture, it says that when the Messiah comes, he'll be riding on an ass, on a donkey, right? On a particular day of the week, on a particular day of the year. And then the people will throw palm leaves in front of him and they'll be yelling, Hosanna, Hosanna, the king has arrived, the king has arrived, right? So Jesus rolls up in the town a week before Easter, and the people proclaims him as being Hosanna. So he's on a donkey being led by some people, and people are throwing palm leaves in front of it. Those palm leaves represent what they call the red carpet today, right? Listen to me now so you can hear, right? What they call the red carpet, that was the palm leaf. It was the carpet the donkey was walking on. So Jesus gets there and he goes to the temple. And he finds that there's a bunch of money changers in the temple, right? So he goes off. He tears up the temple, he beats up people, right? He's flogging people. They're talking about he's some peaceful dude. He's kicking ass, right? In this temple. And then him and his boys run away. Now, I think it's in Mark, if you look, when he tells them to take the money they have and go buy all the swords they could, right? Now, this is Jesus, right? So what are you doing with sword if he got God on his side? He's the man of peace and he come to die, right?
Right.
And when the centurions come up on them, Peter, his main man, pulls out his sword. He don't pull out his finger and he chops the dude's ears off, the soldier's ears off, right? This is Jesus' main man. He's armed to the teeth, right? But we read all this stuff and then pretend we don't see it, right? Now, in all that fracas that day, somebody gets captured.
Yeah.
His name is Barabbas. They tell us Barabbas is a thief and a murderer, right? And then something goes on and negotiation goes on and they let Barabbas go but keep Jesus. No. Jesus turns himself in. He uses his main man, Judas. And a little bit of writing on that time by Josephus and Pliny the Younger, Judas is the head of the most revolutionary groups there called the Zealots, right? So Jesus and Judas, they ace goon spoon. So he gets Judas to go and negotiate for 30 pieces of silver, the surrendering of Jesus. Why? Because he has to get Barabbas out of jail. Why would he wants to get Barabbas out of jail? Etymology. All of the roots of the word. Bar, son of, Barabbas, Lord. That was him and Mary Magdalene's son that got busted. And I know what Mary said, but all women say, you better go get my damn child out of jail. You caused that mess that got him put in jail. So Jesus gets Barabbas. He gets Barabbas, son of the Lord, out of jail. This is their own literature that you don't read. You let them tell you the story. Read it and see what different sense it will make to you. So now Barabbas is free. Jesus is locked up.
But you know, a lot of people will read it, Baba, and when they're reading it, they're trying to make these characters real,
Make them real. I'm saying,
or they're trying to say that it's, you know, don't take it literal.
They said it's literal.
Try to do it.
No,
all these
listen
different
to what I'm saying. You're not listening. You're doing what they tell you to do. Listen to me. This is their story. This is what they're telling you, right? And they tell you it's real. Okay, fine. Even in that, you can disprove them even more easily, as I'm doing to you.
Yes.
You understand what I'm saying? Take their interpretation.
True.
Then so that they take Barabbas, they don't tell you Bar means son of in Hebrew, and Rabbas is from the root word Lord. And so that guy was the son of the Lord that was locked up after the fracas Jesus had when he ran the money changers out of the temple. Well, the money changers is the Wall Street brokers and the bankers. So he messed with the big boys. And they went after his son, who was one of the community revolutionary leaders. But Jesus, being the leader, according to their literature, turns himself in, but he had to set it up like a trade out with Judas. And because he know he's the priest, he could get away. So the next day, it's a Friday, and they're trying him, and they're taking him to the cross. Now, Friday is what? The Shabbat, the Sabbath. Means after 4 o'clock, nobody can be buried, nobody can be killed, nothing like that. Everybody's supposed to go pray. It's Sabbath. From sundown on Friday until sundown on Saturday. So how they going to get Jesus to the cross, killed and buried before the Sabbath? It's impossible if you're going to kill him using crucifixion, because that takes 3 or 4 days with you suffocating yourself with the body weight pulling down, causing your shoulder muscle to strangulate you. Right? That's what makes it such an ugly death. So they have to, in one day, get him on the cross, get him off, get him buried in 2 hours. So how are they going to pull this off? They said there's 2 other guys there. And they tell you, they break the other 2 dudes' legs, but they don't break his. Why? They break their legs because they got to get him off the cross, right? Before Shabbat. So they break their legs so they can't run. They could deal with them on Monday or Sunday, right? But they don't break Jesus's leg. What's that about? But we don't ask this question, do we?
Yeah.
Then a good Christian would say, well, small, I got you.
No.
They stabbed him in the side with a spear. I go like, yes, they did, according to your literature. But also your literature said he bled blood and water. And any physician or good nurse will tell you, if someone, when injured in that way, bleeds blood and water, it means the metabolism is slowed down to such a degree that they can't possibly bleed to death. Yes, what I just tell you is true. Check with any doctor, any scientist, and they'll tell you that that's the truth. Now, how did Jesus get into a state where his metabolism was slowed down to such a degree, like you see when somebody falls in a frozen pond but don't drown after hours, and when you defrost them, they come back to life? Well, that's what was happening there. Because fast forward or go back about 30 minutes, Jesus said, according to their literature, I thirst. And they gave him vinegar and gall. Well, the word for gall and the word for pure poppy juice in Hebrew is gall. So they gave him fermented apple juice, vinegar, and pure poppy juice. And that's what slowed down his metabolism. So when they stabbed him, he didn't die because his brain was not calling for oxygen and the heart wasn't pumping that fast, so he would not bleed to death. And then they took him down and took him to the tomb of one of his buddies, Joseph of Arimathea, and them sisters, the Mobile women went in there and passed him up and took him away. Now tell me a better story than that, and that comes right from their story that we don't read and interpret for ourselves.
So he never really died.
How did that commercial on TikTok say, you want a bomba? You want to be with the big boys? Let's Bumba. Come on, tell me. Break up what I just said. Break up what I just said. Because you can't. Because you took an African mythology, which is based around Asar, Aset, and Haru, and you tried to anthropomorphize it to fit your culture and your historical time set with the Romans to create the thing that you now call Jesus, that you want to make the savior of the world. And you've at least made it the savior of the world to the degree it saves you from the people you're oppressing, because they're all waiting for him to come and deal with you for them instead of them dealing with you for themselves.
So, Baba, would you say the power they got was the materialization of that myth and then claiming to be the vicar of Christ?
Mm-hmm.
So holding the power of God on earth?
Yeah, it's a myth.
And Schopenhauer said something about Christianity. He said that Christianity came as the divider of worlds, to divide the...
No, it didn't come as that. It has become that. Christianity begun as an attempt on the part of the African to inform the barbaric European with enough knowledge to civilize him. But we gave him just enough and made him just civilized enough that he kicked our butt. Now that's what it started as. And what started out as Roman state ideology became what we call a religion today. Because the state was taken over by financial ideologies that we now call capitalism, but they still have the mind being controlled by the socio-cultural ideology, which we call religion.
So is that the concept of Roman Catholicism? Is that like where that originated?
Well, all Catholicism means is universal. They were simply referring to the institution they were designing, because the Romans thought that they were going to rule the world forever. So the ideology that they formulated based on the information they got from us, they called that as universal. This is the universal truth. This is the universal body of knowledge that will form the consciousness of man. And the word Catholicism means universal. That's all it means. And out of that, other poor crackers realized that only the rich crackers is profiting from this ideological phenomena. And so Luther and some of the other cats rebelled. So that's what's called, the Martin Luther referendum, when he says, because they were saying that the Catholic Church was saying, to get to heaven, you got to pay this much money. We ain't got that kind of money to pay to get to heaven, right? Only rich folks got that kind of money. So how are we going to get to heaven? So Luther said, that's not what the literature says. So that's the Reformation. And that's out of that comes the Protestant churches starting in the 1500s, right? But the Catholic Church itself is 1,000 years younger than the Ethiopian Church, which is a branch of the Byzantine Church. Byzantine was the Eastern Roman Empire, or Turkey, in the Middle East, which was then mostly black folks. They're called the Eastern Orthodox Church today, or the Oriental Church. The Eastern Orthodox are like the ones who branched off of that and got into Bulgaria and Russia and so forth. And they don't follow the Pope, but they kind of like agree with them, but they don't follow him. But that other church, the Oriental Church, is saying, we don't follow none of that shit. But that's the church out of which the Ethiopian Church comes. But the Ethiopian traditionalists said that's not our thing, so burnt it to the ground. And then King Lalibela went up in the mountains and built those churches in the ground, St. George's and the others that we see as being so phenomenal today. But we don't realize that ideology helped to kill Ethiopia. Yes, we brag about how they beat the Italians, but they beat the Italians by betraying the largest state called the Sudanese and allow them to be defeated by the British and the Arabs and the Turks. Because the British was giving them arms to fight the Italians. So they didn't then, the Ethiopian then, Menelik and them didn't back up Abdullah, who was fighting the British. Yeah. So that's why we got to study history, see, and make sense out of all of this stuff. And so even the things that we give ourselves great credit for, like defeating, like the great victory of Menelik, at what cost to the rest of Africa did that victory come? You see? With the defeat of the Sudan, and the capture of Masada and the Nile River. And so we have to study history so we put all this stuff in a context that makes sense to us and stop looking at our history from European eyes. You know? If we look at our resistance to the Berlin Conference, right?
Yes.
One of the major battles, first major battle after the Berlin Conference, was Muhammad Ahmed, a brother who was leading the armies of Sudan against the Turks and the British coming out of Egypt. At this time, Egypt was no longer under our control. It's under the British and the Turks' control, right? And so they sent a general down there named Gordon. Well, the brothers in the Sudan, they sent Gordon with 23,000 soldiers. Those brothers sent him back to Cairo with 3,000. But he left 23 dead or wounded along the way. But you know how they got Muhammad Ahmed? A collaborator poisoned him. And then Abdullah took over the leadership of the people. And the British was moving on them from the north with the Turks, and the French was moving on them coming from Senegal and the west, and they needed Menelik to shore up the east, and Abdullah would have won. But Menelik had gotten arms and money from the British to help defeat the Italians, but he didn't shore up the east. So Abdullah lost. That's the science of history. And we have to understand so we don't make those critical decisions. Yes, we saved a part of Ethiopia. We never saved all of Ethiopia, because even today we got Eritrea to never be in existence. It should be a part of Ethiopia. And this whole argument and fighting that's going on in Ethiopia right now by the light-skinned, white-skinned Tigrinians in the north. Well, the majority of people in Ethiopia is darker than me and wearing dreadlocks long before Jamaica is suffering in poverty, while a handful of light-skinned minority mulattoes has been ruling Ethiopia for centuries, not including Haile Selassie. And that's why Mobutu, Black of the Ace of Spades, who came from the Southerners, overthrew Selassie and them. But the West made you think it was a fight just between the Marxists and the capitalists. No, it was a fight between the ethnic groups that have been set upon for centuries by those who were mixed with the Greeks and the Romans.
So you're saying, Baba, that while His Majesty was fighting colonialism by funding certain revolutionaries going on in Rhodesia and certain places, he too was dealing with an Ethiopian kind of imperialism.
Yes. Haile Selassie, I praise him because he tried, but the ruling elite around him wouldn't let him. There was a ruling elite that's who's fighting with that government now. That whole mess up in the north that has caused this war, that has killed so many people. You have an election. People got elected. And the ruling elite didn't want to give up power, so instead they took money from the American and the CIA and went to war to destroy the government of Ethiopia. Because Ethiopia had made certain economic alliance with China, which was allowing her to get out of that situation where year after year, poverty, meaning bad rainfall and bad harvesting, was creating a condition where our people were dying in the desert. Ethiopia was rolling when this war started. And America and the CIA was firmly behind this war in Ethiopia today. These are the same northern mulattoes who represent the same mulatto class that's ruling Haiti today. A handful of mulatto has got all the rest of our people under their foot because of their collaboration with Israel, America, France, Britain and Germany and Canada. So we need to study history to get rid of the mystery. Don't let this stuff be mystery, you know. And the only people that are royal and kings and queens are those who behave as kings and queens, not those who carry the title of king. The king and the queen is a behavior, not a title. The king and the queen is a servant of the masses of their people, not a despot that lived the good life while the people live in poverty. That's not a king. That's not a queen. That's the way Europeans behave. Study our history, and you'll see that the greatest kings and queens we had were servants to the masses of their people, and not the people servants to them.
Well, right now, Baba, we have Rastafari. Well, I've been a Rastafari from a youth, but right now we have an upsurge of Rastafari on the continent, especially in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike us in the West, when we give up Christianity, we have to really seek for our origins.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the continent, it's different.
Yeah.
They're already embedded in their traditions, and
Right.
so it has been a challenge for them as well as here to release the Abrahamic religion, which kind of still strangles the evolution of Rastafari. And
I agree.
we have one particular General Tau Tau, and he always speaks about the traditions of Africa and how we should return to them and let go Christianity, which is used to back up the title and the giving to His Imperial Majesty as the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah. So right now Rastafari is evolving.
Here's where one of the problems come, with no disrespect. When you're tracing yourself back to the line of Judah, you already fundamentally have created a fantasy that's not really real. Who the hell is the line of Judah? Who is Judah? When that little anomaly took place in the desert, we'd already lived for millions of years. It was insignificant to nothing until white people made a discussion of Israel significant to anything. It was insignificant to nothing. And it's insignificant to anything today, except for the farce to have imperialism rule Northeast Africa from a base called Israel. There's nothing significant about that except what they've made significant to fit their plan to conquer the mind of the world that they wanted to rule. If we're going to trace our power to some line of Judah, then what was the power in the Congo? What was the power? There's no line of Judah in the Congo. What was the power in what is now called Nigeria? What is the power in Namibia? What is the power in Zimbabwe? When there was, who existed, and our royal lines existed for hundreds of thousands of years before there was any Judah, anything. Now, if we want to say that that thing we call the line of Judah, that bloodline that comes down into Ethiopia again as Haile Selassie, then the people who were into Ethiopia when that line got there, who were they? They were waiting for some mulattoes from up in a place where they had murdered a whole civilization called Black civilization, by the way, called
Yemen.
The Canaanites. The Canaanites. Okay? And so we've got to study history again. There is something to the line of Judah. Let's get the right something. Who were the Black people who was trying to get away from the white people who took over Northeast Africa? And learn who the white people was, who the collaborators were. If we go back to the Maccabee family, one of the many families, who I consider to be the African element of that whole group called the Israelites. They were guerrilla revolutionaries. And I don't hear a lot of discussion about the Maccabee family. They were the ones fighting the Greeks and fighting the Greek descendants. It was the last of the brothers, Jonathan, according to their literature, that collaborated and invited the Romans in to try to help them finally crush the Greeks. And the Romans said, oh, they're that weak, let's crush all of them. That's how the Roman got in the Northeast and into the rest of Africa. But if we don't study history, and we keep using his interpretation of history to try and have our discussion about the we, we're never going to solve this. Because Rastafari represent a line of African authenticity. But I just question some of the historical stuff that they tie that authenticity to. Because the oldest people, when you see all the pharaohs wearing the cloth over their head, do you know what they're covering with that cloth?
Locks.
They're covering their locks.
Yeah.
So the locks are sacred. And so if you go back to ancient Zimbabwe and South Africa, they're wearing this lock. Rastafari is older than Judea. Rastafari is older than Israel. Rastafari go back to the very beginning. If you go right now to Botswana and you were training to be a priest or priestess in the indigenous system, the first thing you have to do is grow those locks. And you maintain them for at least 5 years until you finish your training. As a reference back to the oldest civilization ever. The Rastafari is older than anything. Judah is a non-factor to me in the history of Rastafari. The Rastafari refer to the very earliest time that we can.
Yes, thank you, Baba.
The very
Thank
earliest
you.
time that we know ourselves to be human. And I think if we kind of just deal with what the thing that occurs in Northeast is a renewal, I will accept that. Because we had been invaded by the Hittites and the Hyksos and the Assyrians and the Persians and the Greeks. And then we had to fight our way out. If we look at that, then we understand why we were fighting our way from the so-called Israel back down into Ethiopia. Because if Israel and Jerusalem was the thing, why aren't we running up there instead of running southward to Ethiopia?
So you're saying, Baba, that the formation of Christianity by Augustine, Tertullian, and Origen, and all these men, it was under duress
Right.
of colonization.
They were trying to civilize that barbarian enough for them to leave us alone, but it did not work. What they were trying to do was calm the beast by giving them something. They didn't give them all of our system. Christianity isn't a duplicate of our system. Islam or Judaism, they're not duplicates of our system. They're fragments. They were given just enough. Just like looking at Freemasonry, when they're talking about 3 degrees, but our system is 360 degrees. So 3 might look good if you come from a system that had nothing, you know? So Christianity looks like heaven if you're a barbarian.
Right, right.
You're a woman in the cave when you ran out of food in the winter. But those are just fragments that they had hoped would civilize these people enough that they could build societies that wasn't predicated on committing genocide against their neighbors. But it didn't work. And now we have adopted the system that was supposed to turn the barbarian into a human and didn't work. And now it's taken us and making us barbarians. Because we act just like them. We act like the barbarians we want to get away from.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, Baba, the traveling men in St. Lucia, it has been, they are very biblical, and it ties them into the, English Freemasonry and
Mhm.
the royal family, but there are a few
The
that
unroyal family, there's nothing royal about them killers and thieves.
all right. Well, a few of them are trying to,
You see?
because we wanted to develop an order in Saint Lucia, but
Well, I'm a traveling man, right? Cornerstone 37, Prince Saul Grand Lodge, State of New York. I have nothing against Masonry. It comes right out of Africa. But you got to go back to Africa to get beyond the British realm. The British 3 degrees so limits us, it's pathetic to think of. But we have used it well, but it has run its course unless we expand it back to its African beginning.
well, that's a challenge.
It's a big challenge. And so they bring in the Knights Templars to expand the realm, and they bring in the York Rite and the Scottish Rite, and then they get up to 33. But we're talking about 360 degrees of universal understanding of how cosmology and ecology works with the human being an intricate part of it. They can't get there, so they won't let us get there. They won't let us get back there. They can't get there, but they don't want us to get back there. And that's what this fight is about. That's why we bring it back down to food, clothing, shelter, safety, and security, controlling land, labor, and resources, being in charge of economic, politics, and culture where you live. What is going to be the philosophy and ideology that allows you to do that? And that's when you go to black. Get back to trying to understand what Africa was saying before Christianity, what Africa was saying before Judaism, what Africa was saying before Islam. Take those 3 things, throw them in the junk pile, and have a discussion, starting with Kemet, and then go back. Because Kemet isn't the first of our great civilization. It may not even be the best of our great civilization. It is just the most preserved in terms of bodies of information,
Right?
of civilization.
Because they're written in stone.
Right.
Information was written in stone. You know what I mean? So a lot of, like, in other places, like the rainforest and things of that nature, it dissolved.
Yeah,
like, but stone would dissolve.
They just hit it differently. They hit it in the sounds of the language. They hit it in the rhythm of the drum. They hit it in the dance movements of the body. They hit it in the spiritual energy that one gives off when they have this body of knowledge. We still got it, but we don't know ourselves that way no more. We need to get to know ourselves again. We're trying to take the white self that we've become and be the black self we want to be. Ain't gonna work. We just gonna be confused.
Right.
And we're not gonna be able to enlighten our masses. Economic, politics, and culture must be mastered by you where you live if you're going to provide food, clothing, shelter, and safety for yourself and your family. And that means you got to gain control of land, labor, and resources. So you can't sit in a community and not buy up the abandoned buildings and make businesses out of them and get upset when white folks or Asians come and buying up and start screaming gentrification. Because no, that was your abandonment of your opportunities because you're focusing in somebody else's reality instead of yours. And so history informs you of how to survive. Culture educates you in the tools of survival based on the experiences it draws from history. And all of that helps to get rid of the mystery. So you can work your black magic and not be scared of black magic. I love black magic. When I say we are God having a human experience, nobody can prove that wrong. Because if God is omnipotent, omnipresent, and supreme, nothing else can exist but God, right? And if only God exists, like they say in Ghana, if only God exists, then what are we? Aspect of the thing that exists. And as an aspect of the thing, you contain the total possibility of the thing, like any clone. We tell the science this proof is your Godhead. It's the king, and that's what you are. And everything you know about God came from the minds of a black man and a black woman. You can't imagine nothing greater than your own possibility. You can't imagine nothing greater than your own possibility.
Ras Abdullah. Ras Abdullah, I haven't heard from you for the evening.
Ras,
Well, my hi, Yaba. Yeah, but I just been listening, you know. Very, very interesting.
now I've walked in the Rasta community in Brooklyn, in Jamaica.
Yeah, I know. I've seen some photos.
Okay, so you know back in '92 there was some problems up in them hills.
Yeah.
And I came to those hills with Julius Carbon. And we went up and we broke up a peace. And the brothers and sisters up there loved me. I need to come back home to Jamaica. They even wrote poetry. And real Rasta poetry, you know. So when we think of the Rasta community, you're thinking of one of the most well-preserved African cultural clusters in the Western Hemisphere. We never
Yeah. I hear, man.
And we retained, you see, we retained our cultural essence in a way very few groups in the Americas was able to do it. It's only in recent time now we're bringing in too much of this outside Christian stuff. We need to walk back and wait for it. When young rascals.
I think maybe the background is kind of distorting the sound.
Okay, then we should speak more slowly. But I'm
Yeah,
saying,
Abdullah, mute your mic. Mute your mic.
Yeah, I unmute my mic already.
Mute it.
Yeah.
Mute it. Because you have the background and already the youth in the ad playing music.
That's why.
Yeah, it's hard to make out what Baba-Prof was saying.
yeah,
I
what
think
I
he
was saying is
accidentally
that
hung himself up.
the Rasta community is one of the best preserved African cultural sanctuary in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
But I don't think they dig deep enough into that well themselves. You understand what I'm saying?
No,
That
they don't.
when you run away, as soon as you step off the boat, the only thing you got to take with you is Africa, to those hills and to the bush. And you preserve that. But sometimes we bury things so deeply, we don't know where to go find it and dig it up again to use it now that we need it. And I say the same thing about the Africans in the United States. Slavery don't start in the United States until about the 1700s, not 1619. That 15 or so people, they got free and died free people. And between 1619 and 1690, we didn't have 100,000 people. It's after 1690 that they go full hog and enslaving us in the United States. And we're free of that in at least the physical manner by 1865. Then we get another 100 years to 1965 when a lot of the psycho-spiritual and political slavery is thrown on. We're still enslaved, like most of us in this hemisphere. But we were enslaved in chattel less than any group in the Western Hemisphere. But we don't look to see where we hid Africa. Where is our retention? Where do we hide the wisdom? In that sense, the church was our friend because that's where we hid it. But if you don't study books on Africa and if you don't travel to Africa, you won't recognize yourself in the mirror of life. You'll be looking at an African thing and calling it something else. But if you study Africa and get to know Africa, you will recognize yourself in the culture of America, in the culture of the Caribbean, in the culture of Latin America. You will recognize yourself when you see yourself if you know your African ancestral self. But if you don't know your African ancestral self, you will even kill your contemporary African self because you don't even think it's African.
So, Baba,
yeah,
can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
I want to. I'll be taking my first trip to Africa. I haven't really arranged the timing of it yet, but what would be a good first country or first place for someone who's just their first time visiting? What would be a good country to visit?
The best to visit would be Ghana. Why? Ghana has the largest. One would think it's Ethiopia, but Ghana has the largest Rasta community in Africa, mostly coming out of Jamaica. Over 8,000 to 10,000 Jamaicans that made Ghana its home. About 7,000 to 8,000 African Americans make Ghana its home. Because Ghana has been receptive to receiving us back home since Kwame Nkrumah. And this is played down because the white Americans don't want us to know that so many of us have moved back home over the years and never come back here. And the young people are just going every day. The next one I would think would be Rwanda or Uganda. But I would put Ghana at first.
Ghana first, okay.
And then
What about Kenya?
Senegal, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, and then Kenya, in that order.
Okay.
Ghana, Rwanda, Uganda, Senegal, Tanzania, and Kenya. And the only reason I took Ghana first because there's so many support mechanisms in place so that the culture shock that you're going to experience is minimal. And then once you get your footing, then you can look at any place else in the rest of the continent that you may feel more comfortable in.
Okay.
I know a lot of people who live in Tanzania now, live in Kenya now, living in Rwanda now. But they started out usually in Ghana, got their footing, got back into the culture, began to get back into the feel of the language, and looking at the tradition. Now, everywhere you go in Africa, the Christian church is there, the mosque is there. But what's also there is the traditional system. And even for the people, 90% of them that go to church still believe in the traditional system too. So it's like this dual contradiction that the young people are trying to break away from. And so you'll see them both. And you have to learn how to manipulate your choices.
Right. Okay. I definitely gonna go to Ghana first. That's what my spirit was telling me, but I just wanted clarification.
Yeah, because it's welcoming in that it's had this experience since Nkrumah of welcoming us back home. So Ghana calls itself the new gateway to Africa. And then when you go into Kenya and Tanzania and look at that whole phenomena on the East Coast, you see a whole another kind of cultural development and cultural retention and receptivity. And you'll be used to it by that time. But you're seeing more people now going to Ethiopia and Tanzania without even stopping into West Africa, and Kenya and Tanzania. Ethiopia would have been, if they weren't at war right now, would have been a good place to go. There's just so much history there. And again, there's a large Jamaican community and Rasta community there that you could bond with, who could help you see the environment that's there. And what I tell people in the Caribbean, we don't do enough traveling, especially Black Americans, to the African Caribbean. There's so much African retention that's there that we don't even acknowledge and pay attention to. In Jamaica, in Haiti being in crisis now, it's not safe to go, unless you're with certain people. in Trinidad, you know, in Martinique, and where Kobe was from. So there's so much right here that is authentically African in the Caribbean that will help you prepare yourself to go to the continent of Africa.
So maybe I should do that first. Maybe I should visit, you know.
I would think about that. I would think about going to St. Lucia.
Yeah,
You know,
my
Baba,
brother.
You know, Baba, I always say that there should be more collaboration.
You know,
There should be more collaboration with the Africans in America and the Africans in the Caribbean, because we
I
have
agree.
something here that y'all do, that we have Africans that have a certain amount of power, whether it be political power and also a little economic power. And we don't have, I mean, I go weeks, months without seeing a European at all, you know? So we still have this Africanness, though of course a lot of us claim we're not African. But there are things that are undeniable, especially our craving to come together, whether sometimes it's under banners of division, but we always like to come together. And we have two languages. We have English, Ekluka along a French Creole.
No, it's not a French Creole. That's an African Creole using some aspects of French. Change how you speak. That's your African Creole.
Yes, so
because you're speaking French, just like you speak English with an African, with a French vocabulary, but an African grammar structure.
right, yes.
So we say different things. You know, I think that going, you know, I used to spend a lot of time in Trinidad, a lot of time in Jamaica. So I believe that the Caribbean gives you a feel of Africa when you get there. You know?
Yes.
I'm initiated. I didn't go to Nigeria to get initiated in my Yoruba shrine. I went to Trinidad, Shaquanis, the Enterprise Village, the Kenny Ile Jube. These are Yoruba practitioners who've been there since slavery time. The shrine came from Caracou in Grenada. It's a beautiful place to go to.
That's
To go
beautiful.
to Caracou. Go to Caracou, you swear you're in Africa. Right? And that shrine in Caracou came there from Haiti after the revolution, after the death of Dessalines.
Wow.
You know? So there's just so much history. That's why we got to learn our history, learn our culture, you know. And I remember when I first went to Caracou in Grenada, and the night we were there, we got in late, so everything was closed except one little store.
Yeah.
So the sister, this doctor, we had gone on a medical mission with my wife and some other doctors. And so we went to this little store, me and one of the doctors, because she was from Caracou. And when I walked in the store, I heard the people speaking the Ghanaian Twi language. Like, oh, what part of Ghana y'all from? They said, Ghana, we ain't from no Ghana, boy. I said, well, y'all speaking Twi. They said, we ain't speak no Twi. We speak Caracou.
Hey.
But it was Twi.
Whoa.
It was Ghana Twi.
okay.
Akan. And I go like, oh my God. And so by the next day, this is like almost 20 years ago. And you know, I've been out here teaching for a long time. So they hear that I'm in town. And some people had just bought and built a new house. And they were christening, what we call christening the house. So they asked if I would come over because they knew I was a priest and poured a libation. So I went to this house with the sister, and there's a table full of food. I'm talking like food, like a banquet for 100 people. And in the middle of the table was a pig with an apple in the mouth. That pig was barbecue, crisp brown, all of this good food. And there were people in the backyard, they were cooking in the old African stone oven.
Yes.
For that occasion, you don't cook on a stove. You cook in the old African way. And that food was for the ancestors. Girl, I was so hungry. Looking at all this good food, but you couldn't eat it.
You put it again.
It had to stay on the table for the ancestors. I forgot how long, and then it was then distributed to the needy community. I said, this is straight out of Africa, but it's in Karakou. And they speak in Akan, but they call it Karakou. So Africa never died. We brought it with us. And we practice it every day in the Caribbean by different names. And that's why it's important. African Americans begin to travel to the Caribbean more, and also travel to Africa. But I say have a trip to the African Caribbean. I use African Caribbean versus the Latin Caribbean, because the Latin Caribbean is in a heavy denial in most places of their Africanism. Go to the African Caribbean and then go to Africa, and you'll be ready. You'll be ready.
I think that's a better path. I like that. I like that.
You know,
idea.
Baba, I've been to.
Where are you from, sister?
I've been to Ghana. I went to Ghana back 20.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to 12 and I stayed for 7.5 weeks.
Wow.
And I moved around Ghana a lot. I went to Kwasi, Abri, Cape Coast, Kumasi. What's the next one? Medina.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, little places like that. I kind of like moved around the place because I was there for 7.5 weeks, so I was able to kind of move on and understand that way. And it was good because I was able to see my great grandfather's twin. I saw my great auntie twin. Like I could see where my bloodline come from. I even saw my twin.
You see people.
When I went to Kumasi and I saw my great.
Go ahead, sister.
Say that again.
No, I said it'll blow your mind how.
Oh yeah, so I
stayed with your family.
Oh yes, exactly.
So.
I saw people that look like Jamaicans that I know. You understand? I saw my granddaughter's mother twin, but just like the family. Look just like them, and they're from St. Thomas, Jamaica. When I went to Kumasi and I saw my great grandfather.
But Africa didn't stay in Africa when we left. It came with us. Africa is in you. Wherever you went, we took Africa with us. I
saw it.
And we came from different parts of the continent, so we brought different parts of the continent with us, and we amalgamated it all together. So we are an African nation. Wherever an African is, one African, you're an African nation. So we got hundreds of thousands of African, we are a bigger African nation.
Yeah.
Wherever the African is, that's where the African nation is, because Africa is in us. But this Africa needs to go get some food.
That's right.
And get some rest so I could go back to work in the morning. My poor wife didn't even get to talk to her husband at all tonight. I heard her go upstairs to go to bed.
Okay.
And I was running in the door straight from the car, straight from the work. But we have to do this. We have to do this.
Thank you, Baba. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing your time and knowledge. And it was just, I just listened. All I can do is listen. I felt like I was in class. I definitely was in class. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you. And I'll be happy to come back. So Rastafari and I and Wasir, we need to do some more discussion because people don't really know the history of Rastafari. And
surely
we need to really do one that just deal with what is Rastafari.
We need you back. And you're ready.
Yes, truly.
Look at the image and they identify it. Say, oh, Rastafari. But all they mean is like I see somebody with locks and I see somebody who is from Jamaica or from Ethiopia. But they don't really understand what is the ideology, what is the philosophy.
Actually, Baba, we're looking
culture system.
Actually, we're looking to write a book, Baba, on the history of, because I've written 2 journals. We have our group we call the White Lotus Temple. It's a research group, and we're trying to write the book. In fact, we're going to write it, the history of Saint Lucia, before all the elders, because the elders are starting to die out.
Yeah.
We started to put it together, and Ras Abdullah is my teacher. Is one of the first Rastafari on the island. You know, so we're trying to document that information on that.
Well, use that tape recorder and go and interview them, interview as many as you can, so you can then sit down with all this information before they leave us. Because I made that mistake where I come from in South Carolina. I didn't tape the elders. I'm blessed that me and my brothers and them, we have lived long. I've got 2 brothers older than me and a sister in their 80s, and they're still healthy, and we are now talking to each other. But record those elders as many as you can, as soon as you can.
Yes.
So you can see that history.
You know how Dr. Fukuyao talks about the rope that binds up to the first ancestor, who is the divine? Well, Professor Smalls is one of that knots that binds us to our ancestors. And I really give thanks for him being here, and I want him to know that he is appreciated.
Well, I feel
Yes.
so enormously loved by my people. That's what keeps me going. Even those who have been harmful and hurtful, I know they didn't do it for the motive the enemy does. It's because they've been injured. But most of my experience with my people have been that of loving and caring and giving. As I want to give that back. It's like the Yoruba word "lukomi." It means you belong to me and I belong to you. And the greatest love is for me to own you as mine. You to own me as yours. That's the lukomi. That's who we be.
Sounds beautiful. Sounds beautiful.
Can we see you again in 2 weeks, Baba? You think your schedule will permit that?
Not 2 weeks. Give me 3 weeks, and then I'll be free. Because I'm working on this project with Malcolm, and it's getting like tonight I ran it. It's intensified because he's going to get assassinated in this series. I'm working on this police. And that's so we had episode, I think, 5, and he'll be assassinated in episode 10. And I got to be on top of all of this. Sometimes it's a 12-hour day. And then I'm doing all the other stuff in between.
Make sure everyone's right.
You know, so in 3 weeks, let's do this again. And then I'll try to make sure I'm not so tired and I'm not just rushing in off the highway and everything. But this was a good discussion. I like impromptu discussions because I think we can cover more. And then we can have some central questions that we keep coming back to. But keep the impromptu-ness, because all of us have a contribution to the conversation to try, and don't be afraid to talk to one another. And even me, I may think I know something that you may prove I don't know at all, so tell me and teach me. I'm open to be taught by you. I've come to you with what's in my pot. That's not the whole pot, you know. I may just have some rice and beans, but you may have some rice and beans and chicken. The other brother got some rice and beans and beef. The other brother may have some okra and his rice and beans. So we all come to the table with a pot with something in there that we can share the taste with everybody else. You know?
Beautiful.
That's how we learn.
Exactly.
Well, you see, your vessel is so full.
Yeah.
Baba, your vessel is so full. Sometimes we just have to sit and just drink.
That's it.
I just love you because you are me. You are me, and I am you. And Pan-Africanism will be real. Will be really a phenomenon. I belong to you, and you belong to me. And the ones that's broken, we have to fix them. We can't leave them. We have to fix them. That's a difficult job, but that's the job we got.
But
This is
isn't that if they want to be fixed, Baba? Because some of them don't want to be fixed. They like just where they are.
no. No one wants to be sick. No one wants to be a slave. No one wants to be broken. They just don't know any better because they're broken and because they're sick. And that makes our work difficult. But that's the work we've chosen.
Right,
That's what
right.
makes us the priest and the priestess. That's because we are their servant. We've been sent by the powers of the divine. When we are given knowledge they don't have, it means we've been sent by the powers divine to raise them up. And it's not going to be easy. For us, you've been at this a while. This ain't easy. This is what we have to do. This is what we have.
Okay, Ras Abdullah, you can say we're about to end the meeting, so you can say something before we close down. Abdullah.
Yes, Abdullah.
Yes,
It's your
brethren.
turn.
Yes, yes. Give thanks for everything. Because I've been following the man for quite a while, on the different YouTube channels,
Yes, sir.
especially the one at the Africa, the mother of Freemason and these things, where in the beginning you gave something on the Rasta and the locks,
Yeah, that's a nice tape. I need to look back at that sometime.
This is beautiful. This one is especially beautiful.
Yeah, Freemasonry, Africa's black child is what I call it.
Yes, exactly. This is beautiful, You give thanks, man, to, feel the energy so close, Yeah, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
You
sir.
know? Blessed give thanks. Yeah, man. Blessed. I really.
Yes,
So
so
maybe
Ras
that could
Abdullah.
be the topic in 3 weeks. We can revisit that.
I would like start with the topics that you had outlined that we didn't finish tonight, and let's just continue the dialogue on those same topics. You may come up with one or two new ones.
Okay, true.
Because things happen every day.
True.
But let's try to also finish up the ones we didn't cover tonight.
Okay, that'll work.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, of that. Yes.
I wanted to
Okay.
speak
Give
a little
thanks,
bit-
man.
I wanted to speak a little
And
bit
thank you,
about
Baba Smalls.
Dus
Love you so much.
Yeah, give thanks.
Muhammad Ali.
I
And
read.
trade with Africa
Yeah.
and the Caribbean, trade with the Americas. With Dus Muhammad Ali. But I guess we can talk about that in the next time.
Yeah, because was a great and a brave young man who, like so many of our young men and women, gave their life so we could be better off. He could have gone and been a boxer and made a lot of money and did what the white man wanted. But he said, no, I'm not doing that. And they made him suffer. But that's okay. His spirit is eternal. He had children and they have children. And so he lives on.
Sure.
And so the memory that he created at that time and that person, we learned from that teacher. But he's his children and his grandchildren going forward, making more memories. And if they're properly taught, becoming also great teachers.
Yeah.
Remember,
Yeah.
freedom is being shackled to your identity. Shackled to your identity. True freedom is to be shackled to your identity. And that identity is not just the label Africa, but it's the philosophy, it's the culture, it's the worldview, it's the ideology that comes when we see the dances. Every dance in Africa has a message. Every drum rhythm has a message. Every piece of cloth tells a story. Africa is a living culture, a living ideology, and we need to study her so we can rebirth ourselves, constantly rebirthing ourselves, rebirthing African consciousness in ourselves. But you can't do that if you don't know your history.
For real. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say, I beg your permission.
Cleaning up our DNA. We need to clean up our DNA from that old slave syndrome.
Hmm.
Yes, Baba, you need your
Surely.
rest. You need your rest, Baba.
Yes. Yes.
So
Right.
we'll be together again in 3 weeks, and Peru and y'all are setting
Yes,
up,
we will.
and we'll continue the discussion.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. Give thanks again, brethren.
Yes,
Yeah.
Give
Baba.
thanks.
Thanks to everyone.
Almighty guide the man and preserve the
Peace and love.
Kwaheri, Baba. Uncle Jasnet.
Thank you, my brother. Peace.
Yes.
Yes, it was a nice one. Okay, Empress.
very. Empress, give
This
thanks.
is
Yeah,
my,
we-
this is my elder. This is my elder. This is my elder. I always keep telling you about the one that tried to bring the books and the information to the Nyabingi, and they rejected it and
Right.
They turn it down, They turn it down.
Right.
They didn't want
Yes.
it. But Africa lives.
Experience that.
Yeah, man. Give
I
thanks, though.
understand
Give
it now
thanks again.
because when you get first, yes, I got first-hand experience in what you went through, so I know exactly what
Yes,
you've been going
yes,
through over the years,
yes,
and
yes.
it's a pleasure meeting
Well,
you.
he's
Yes,
already,
yes.
It's an honor
he's already met.
having you here.
Yeah, he met Priest Isaac. He met Priest Isaac, and when Priest Isaac was in Saint Lucia, and, he knows Kalash because it's like he's an elder, so he knows the runnings, and I always fill him in, so he knows what's going on.
Yes.
Yeah, man. You don't know.
Okay.
Yes, Mrs.
Right.
Blessed. Aye. Yeah,
That's
man.
all right.
Give thanks.
Blessed love. Yes. Love
Almighty.
and gratitude.
Yes.
Nice
Yes,
meeting
true.
you.
Peace
and
and
see
love.
you next time.
Yes.
See you in 3 weeks.
Yes.
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 Again.
Okay, you will for sure. Give thanks.
That's right. Have a blessed one. Love and gratitude.
You
Blessed
too.
night,
Yeah,
Empress.
man.
That's Uncle Justin.
Do a who?
And give thanks for all the listeners. Thanks for tuning in.